Bleach. Studying medicine can't save the spirit world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 226. Courage. Sound. Senju Cheng suddenly woke up, and his waist, which was originally lazily leaning on the edge of the hot spring, stopped instantly, and looked towards the source of the sound. What caught his eye was Kotetsuya, who was holding a large number of team documents. Kotetsuya's cheeks were as red as if they were dripping blood, and his head was lowered. He didn't dare to look at Senju Cheng at all, as if he was staring at his toes. It's him. Seeing this, Senju Cheng's heart, which was almost scared to jump out of his chest, regained its composure again. He wiped the sweat with the white towel on his head and leaned back lazily. It's not Unohana, teacher, then it's okay. Kotetsuya, that's a trustworthy person. Senju Cheng is not worried that Kotetsuya will secretly report to Unohana Retsu. Senju Cheng also put his arms on the edge of the hot spring, changed to a more comfortable posture, closed his eyes and asked, "Is there anything wrong?" "Ewin." "Yes, Vice Captain Senju, there are some team affairs that need your signature, sign." Kotetsuya said with a stammer. His face was red as blood, and his legs were inexplicably weak. Obviously, for the Shinigami of the 4th Division, touching corpses and understanding spirits are the simplest basic skills. Kotetsuya has studied more than 10 male Shinigami spirits in the funeral home. Usually, Kotetsuya follows Senju Cheng and has assisted in the treatment of a large number of injured male Shinigami many times. He has seen all kinds of male spirits. However, when he saw Senju Cheng's streamlined muscles from the corner of his eye just now, Kotetsuya felt that he couldn't lift his head, but his eyes unconsciously wanted to glance in the direction of Senju Cheng. Team affairs? Senju Cheng looked up at the sky that was almost dusk, and said with his back to Kotetsuya, "Is it urgent and must be completed on the same day?" "That, not really." Kotetsuya answered in a low voice. "In that case, let's deal with it tomorrow." After a pause, Senju Cheng continued. "Yongin, team affairs will never be finished. Since it's time to rest, take a good rest. Work and life should be separated, otherwise you will feel extremely exhausted sooner or later. Do you understand?" Yes. Kotetsuya tried hard not to move his eyes in the direction of Senju Cheng, and tried to stare at his toes. However, Kotetsuya realized that he seemed to be the type who couldn't see his toes when he lowered his head. Although Kotetsuya agreed, Senju Cheng knew that the workaholic Kotetsuya probably wouldn't listen to such persuasion. He would turn around and continue working, trying to handle the team affairs as beautifully as possible. Thinking of this, Senju Cheng suddenly asked Kotetsuya, "Yongin, do you have time?" What? Just chat with me briefly. Speaking of which, I have been bothering you to assist me in handling team affairs, but I have never known you well. This is undoubtedly a dereliction of duty for me as the vice captain." Senju Cheng said gently. I'm not as outstanding as Vice Captain Senju. I'm nothing special." Kotetsuya replied nervously. "How could that be? I have confirmed with my own eyes that Yongin is very outstanding. Are you doubting my judgment?" Senju Cheng asked back. As soon as this hat was put on, Kotetsuya subconsciously denied it. No, I dare not. How could I doubt Vice Captain Senju? That's right, so Yongin should be a little more confident. After a pause, Senju Cheng continued. "Also, don't address me as Vice Captain Senju during non-official hours." "Yes, Makoto-kun." Hearing Kotetsuya's voice that still seemed a little timid and unnatural, Senju Cheng shook his head helplessly, and when he was about to pick up the teacup to take a sip of tea, he found that the cup was empty. Seeing this, Kotetsuya hurriedly knelt behind Senju Cheng, and then carefully poured tea for Senju Cheng. "Thank you, Yongin." Senju Cheng smiled gently at Kotetsuya, then took the cup and took another sip, and then asked, "Speaking of which, does Yongin have any hobbies?" Hobbies? Kotetsuya was stunned, then thought hard for a while and answered, "I prefer porridge." Porridge? Senju Cheng was a little stunned. What kind of answer was this? Kotetsuya thought that Senju Cheng didn't believe it, so he answered quickly. "Really, porridge is delicious, and it's not easy to grow taller if you eat porridge. Senju Cheng couldn't help but laugh at Kotetsuin's lack of confidence, and then continued to ask. Besides porridge, does Yuin have any other hobbies? Like hobbies or something like that? Hobbies? Kotetsuin bit his lower lip and thought for a while, then said. I like sewing clothes, and I like flower arrangement, but I don't know how to do it at all, flower arrangement. If Yuin is interested, I can teach you at ordinary times, even if it's to repay Yuin for helping me with team affairs. How about it? Senju Cheng asked. How can this be done? This will disturb Ching-jin's time. It's decided. Anyway, Yuin can't be busy with team affairs and other work all the time. She must have her own life. Thank you, Ching-jun. As Senju Cheng soaked in the hot spring, he was almost completely relaxed, and he and Kotetsuin kept chatting casually. Unknowingly, this time it turned into a small hot spring tea party. From hobbies, life goals to family matters, childhood stories, etc. This also gave Makoto Senju a deep understanding of the usually timid and introverted Kotetsuin. Gradually, Makoto Senju was in a daze while chatting in a comfortable and lazy manner, and he felt that he seemed to have squinted a little. Until, another round of soft footsteps sounded in Makoto Senju's ears, and Makoto Senju woke up with a faint feeling. Then, Makoto Senju looked up at the sky, and patted his face with both hands filled with hot spring water. This made Makoto Senju's consciousness much clearer, and he also realized that the time was almost up. At this moment, a dry towel that Makoto Senju had specially placed at the edge of the hot spring was handed to Makoto Senju at the right time. Makoto Senju habitually took the dry towel and wiped his face, and then replied. Thanks, Yuin. Then, Makoto Senju's action of wiping his face suddenly paused. Wait, the sleeve that just handed over the towel was not the black death suit, but the white Captain Sayori. Senju Makoto suddenly turned his head and looked behind him, only to see Unohana with a gentle smile on his face, and asked with his rosy mouth slightly opened. Yong. Yin. Chapter 227 Discuss it. Yong. Yin. Unohana voice was still gentle, but Senju Makoto felt an invisible cold wind come in, and even the temperature of the entire hot spring seemed to drop a lot in an instant. Senju Makoto's head was confused, as if he was a cat that was caught stealing fish, and he became inexplicably flustered. Teacher, listen to my explanation. Explain. Why does Makoto want to explain? Did Makoto do something wrong? Unohana eyes gently curved into a crescent shape, and his lips slightly opened as he asked. However, Senju Makoto suddenly noticed that Unohana left hand hidden in the wide sleeves moved slightly. This posture, Unohana clearly has grasped a unique dark sword hidden in her sleeves. However, as a normal person, who would take a zanpakutō to a hot spring? Subconsciously, Senju Makoto looked at the zanpakutō Sinrawonksayang, which was neatly placed on the side of the hot spring with the Shinigami. This also left Makoto Senju, who was naked except for the towel around his waist, completely without any way to deal with it. Fight? How to fight without even a knife? Run. Makoto Senju would rather die in the hands of Unohana than to keep his reputation. He would never walk his bird under the moonlight in the jingling courtyard. However, Unohana noticed Makoto Senju's subconscious reaction, and said with a curved mouth, revealing a touch of white teeth. Makoto, you have really grown up a lot. Have you learned to draw your sword subconsciously? Makoto Senju, who still maintained his rationality, waved his hands repeatedly and said. Teacher, no, I just made a slip of the tongue. It was definitely a slip of the tongue. After a pause, Makoto Senju said with a sincere and honest look. Teacher, you know me. I was overworked dealing with team affairs, so I planned to take a hot spring bath to relieve my fatigue. I was thinking about team affairs and fell asleep in a daze. So when I woke up, I subconsciously called out Yuin. Oh? Unohana asked with a slightly longer tone. Makoto, you are not a disciple who will deceive your teacher, right? Yes, Senju Makoto nodded obediently. Unohana gently stroked the zanpakutō on his waist with one hand, as if stroking his lover, and stared at Senju Makoto with a little ripple in his crescent-like eyes, and asked. In this case, Makoto must remain honest. Makoto really didn't take advantage of me going out to attend the banquet to deliberately drag you in and you to take a hot spring bath in the courtyard and do something that you dare not let me know. Senju Makoto. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Senju Makoto was suddenly shocked and swore without hesitation. Teacher, please believe me. Unohana Retsu's eyes flickered slightly when he heard this, and the whole person seemed to relax. He no longer felt that extreme danger, which made Senju Makoto breathe a sigh of relief. So, Yun has never been here? Unohana Retsu asked gently. Senju Makoto hesitated for a moment, and did not sense the spiritual pressure belonging to Kotetsu Yun in the courtyard, that is to say, Yun should have left after I fell asleep. Senju Makoto secretly judged and decided not to add fuel to the fire at this special moment. He would add a little artistic processing to the answer, and then check the confession with Kotetsu Yun tomorrow morning to make sure there were no flaws and troubles. With this thought, Senju Makoto shook his head and answered cleverly. Teacher, it is true that I am the only one taking a hot spring bath. Really? Unohana Retsu smiled and pulled his left hand into the air beside him. Instantly, a ripple seemed to appear in the air, and then a layer of ghost barrier was pulled open like a transparent curtain, revealing the one standing behind it, Kotetsu Yun. Senju Makoto. How could it be? This kind of ghost barrier that can hide from his perception is definitely not something that Kotetsu Yun can set up at this stage, and Kotetsu Yun has no reason to set up such a ghost barrier. In other words, this is the barrier set up by Unohana teacher. This, Unohana teacher dug a pit in advance and waited for me to jump in. How can be so sinister? I'm your pure and innocent disciple, I will really be fooled. And Unohana looked at Senju Makoto's stunned and shocked look, and said with a more and more itch smile on his face. Makoto, how do you explain this? I. Senju Makoto, who was completely caught red-handed, couldn't help but look at Kotetsu Yun. Kotetsu Yun lowered his head, looking like he was about to cry with guilt, and said. Yes, I'm sorry, Makoto-kun. I saw you fell asleep and was worried that you would slip under the water and choke, so I waited for Makoto-kun to wake up. Then the captain came back and didn't allow me to make any noise. Senju Makoto couldn't help but sigh when he heard this. Obviously, it's not Kotetsu Yun's fault at all. It's okay, Yun, you go down first. In addition, I may need to rest for the next few days. I'll trouble you and Rita to take care of the team affairs first. Senju Makoto spoke in a tone like a last word, and then waved to Kotetsu Yun, signaling Kotetsu Yun to leave. Kotetsu Yun saw this and glanced at Unohana Retsu. And Unohana Retsu's seemingly gentle side face also nodded slightly, allowing Kotetsu Yun to leave. Kotetsu Yun, who has always been timid and cowardly, turned around and left. After taking 2 steps, he gritted his teeth, but turned back and spoke. Captain Unohana, please don't punish Makoto. Makoto has really worked very hard. He just took a bath in the hot spring to rest. Senju Makoto looked at Tomka Yun, who was rarely courageous, with some surprise, and then couldn't help but reveal a bitter smile. Did Yun, this idiot, really think that Unohana teacher was blaming him for taking a bath in the hot spring without finishing the team affairs? Moreover, if Yun didn't say this, Unohana teacher might be relatively lenient. This is completely of good intention with bad results. Unohana Retsu's expression remained the same, and he waved his hand gently at Tomka Yun and said. What are you worried about, little Yonine? Makoto is my beloved disciple, how could I punish him? I just want to discuss something with Makoto. Hearing this, Tomka Yun, who didn't really understand Unohana Retsu, obviously believed Unohana Retsu's gentle tone, breathed a sigh of relief, bent down and bowed, and quickly left the courtyard. As Kotetsu Yun left, Unohana Retsu turned to look at Senju Makoto gently and asked, Makoto, let's discuss this. Do you want to take up your zanpakutō fight back? Chapter 228. This is not a punishment. However, Unohana Retsu's so-called discussion seemed to be just a formality. He didn't wait for Senju Makoto's answer and directly picked up the zanpakutō. Synopsis and threw it to Senju Makoto. Senju Makoto caught the zanpakutō. Synopsis, and there was no sign of retreat on his face. He would be stacked if he stuck his head out, and he would be stacked if he stacked his head back, rather than kneeling down to take the blow. Senju Makoto naturally had the will to draw his sword. Slowly, Senju Makoto pulled out the zanpakutō. Synopsis in his hand, and the blade reflected the cold light under the moonlight. Witnessing this scene, Unohana Retsu's smile became even more intense, and he spoke. Makoto, you are my most important and beloved disciple. This is not a punishment, do you understand? Of course. Senju Makoto raised his eyes slightly and looked at the gentle and beautiful face of Unohana Retsu in front of him. Under the moonlight, she is more gentle than the bright moonlight. Under the moonlight, she is more beautiful than the quiet scenery in the courtyard. Under the moonlight, she is also more dangerous than the blade. Unohana did not draw his zanpakutō, but only revealed the hidden sword hidden in his sleeve in front of Senju Makutō, and then spoke. Makutō, I can indulge you in many of your willful and wanton behavior, and that kind of Makutō is also quite interesting, but as a teacher, I must teach my disciples a truth, that is, to bully the teacher. Unohana opened his crescent-shaped eyes, revealing an extremely dangerous look, and said, that is absolutely not allowed, especially when you are not yet able to resist the teacher, so how about I do some pleasant activities with Makutō after the banquet? Anyway, Makutō will not die so easily when using the ability of Senbon Bancho, right? Senju Makutō smiled bitterly, and then suddenly thought of something. Then, Senju Makutō did not leave the hot spring pool, but walked to the other side of the hot spring pool away from Unohana, and then held his zanpakutō tightly in both hands and faced Unohana in a fighting posture. Unohana saw this and almost instantly understood what Senju Makutō meant. Oh? Makutō likes fighting in the hot spring? Since this is Makutō's request, it's not impossible to satisfy Makutō. After saying that, Unohana placed his zanpakutō on Senju Makutō's Shinigami, then casually took off the captain's Adori and covered it, holding the dark sword, wearing only the Shinigami, and walked into the hot spring pool step by step in front of Senju Makutō. Soon, half of Unohana body was submerged in the hot spring pool, and the web Shinigami that was tightly attached to it revealed the graceful curves. However, Senju Makutō did not have the extra energy to pay attention to these minor details. As Unohana approached, Senju Makutō almost put all his energy on the dark sword in Unohana hand. The reason why Unohana was asked to fight in the hot spring pool was more to limit Unohana elegant and dangerous movements during the battle, so that he could focus more on the moving trajectory of the dark sword. Although, Senju Makutō did not know how effective this little trick would be in front of Unohana, it would not have a worse result than this. Then Makutō, let's fight and dance in the hot spring for a while. As Unohana finished speaking, the dark sword moved with a trajectory far beyond the scope of Kendo knowledge taught in the Shinigami Academy of Spiritual Arts, and stabbed towards Senju Makutō's face. Senju Makutō's eyes condensed, and he also raised his zanpakutō, Senramanzio, and went up to meet it. However, the next moment, puff! Senju Makutō's chest was cut open, and a large amount of blood spurted out. However, neither Unohana nor Senju Makutō stopped moving at all. Unohana deliberately held back and did not damage the vital parts, and Senju Makutō also had the ability of self-healing zanpakutō. This injury looked terrible, but it was obviously nothing to Senju Makutō. Ding ding, puff, for a moment, in this beautiful and quiet courtyard, a series of sounds rang out from time to time, and a faint blood color seemed to spread under the moonlight. Neither Makutō Senju nor Unohana used any abilities other than swordsmanship, and they kept fighting each other. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that it was Makutō Senju who was constantly being abused, and he kept remembering Unohana swordsmanship with his body. Until the entire hot spring pool turned into a bloody color, it gradually returned to calm. Unohana was bathing in the hot spring full of Makutō Senju's blood without any scruples, and then returned to the room with Makutō Senju, who had been almost drained of the last drop of his spiritual body strength. Then, the light of Uedeo lit up in the room, and Unohana healed Makutō Senju's wounded body bit by bit, staring at Makutō Senju, who seemed to have fainted, as if he recalled something, and murmured faintly. Makutō, the way of the sword is a product born for fighting. There is no faster way to learn the way of the swords than to remember it with your body. No matter what the reason is, you are also eager to become stronger, right? Then remember it well with your body. However, the next moment, Makutō Senju, who was lying in front of Unohana, suddenly opened his eyes, and his eyes seemed to be full of tenderness and pity. He asked a question that stunned Unohana. Teacher Unohana, 1,000 years ago, when you were mastering all the sword styles in Soul Society, did you also get injured like this many times? So your Shikai is that special healing method and healing ability. Unohana expression trembled, and he bit his lips as if inadvertently, and scolded softly. It seems that Makutō has not tried his best yet, and he actually has extra thoughts to consider such boring questions. Makutō Senju shook his head and replied, "No, for me, this is a very important question." In an instant, Unohana seemed to feel Makutō Senju's burning gaze, and he was inexplicably flustered in his heart, but he also breathed a sigh of relief. After all, not everyone can accept that kind of frenzied fighting, and not everyone can have no grudges against the other party who hurt you. Makutō, it seems really good that you don't hate yourself because of this. This is not a punishment, Makutō, it's great that you can really understand. At this moment, Makutō Senju raised his hand and held the wrist that Unohana was treating for him, and said, "Teacher, you are no longer alone. Next time you are injured, let me treat you, right?" Unohana was startled again, then smiled and replied, "If that's the case, then Makutō has to work harder. I also look forward to the day when Makutō can stab my body with the zanpakutō in his hand. P.S. Daily life is actually the most difficult to write. I am stuck with the writer again. The third update will be updated a little later." Chapter 229 Attaching Association. In the following days, Makutō Senju rested at home as he had said to Kotetsuin before. It was not that Makutō Senju was lazy or that his wounds had not yet fully healed. It was just that he had lost so much blood at once, and no matter how strong Makutō Senju's recovery ability was, he had a psychological illusion that he was going to be exhausted. Therefore, Makutō Senju simply took a few days off, and then he had time to work on the problem the Physician's spirit had encountered. In fact, after the zanpakutō rebellion incident ended, Makutō Senju had never stopped related research. However, although Makutō Senju had verified the relevant theories from the spirit constructed by Senbon Bancho, there were obviously still various problems in terms of distance application. The first and foremost was that the special zanpakutō materialized spirit was constructed with the consciousness of the zanpakutō soul itself as the core. Then, when applied to ordinary souls, it is used to make up for some of the defects of the soul itself, increase the density of the spirit body itself, and optimize the spirit body's own spirit structure, so that the other party can withstand higher amplitude spiritual pressure fluctuations, and even improve the spiritual power talent of the spirit body. In other words, once you delve deeper, this is undoubtedly equivalent to another evolutionary direction of the god of death. If the evolutionary direction taken by Aizen Sasuke is to change the original spiritual form of the god of death, by accommodating part of the hollow, then Senju Makutō also realized that the direction he perceived was more like a breakthrough in the limit of the quality of the spirit body. After realizing this, Senju Makutō's research on this was naturally much more cautious and secretive, and gradually turned from the original open research to the dark. For safety reasons, Senju Makutō also specially opened up a small secret space in the basement of the vice captain's residence originally assigned to him in the 4th Squad's barracks. The vice captain's residence of Senju Makutō is now occupied by Rinka Yamada alone, and Rinka Yamada's strength is relatively average, so there is no need to worry about being discovered by Rinka Yamada. In addition, it is not easy for the god of death to explore the living environment of Rinka Yamada, a widow, and there is also Yulu Takuli who is always monitoring the movements inside the Seireitei. Therefore, Senju Makutō is relatively assured of the safety of this underground secret space. As for the various instruments and tools needed for the research institute, it is not a problem for Senju Makutō. After all, as Unohana gradually gave up power to Senju Makutō, now Senju Makutō almost controls the affairs of the entire 4th Division. Senju Makutō only needs to slightly modify some data to easily get the medical-related instruments he needs from the 4th Division. And now, Senju Makutō still has not solved the practical application problem. As for Physician, what should she use as the core for stable spiritual reconstruction? In the end, after experimenting with various methods, Senju Makutō found that the most stable method is undoubtedly to use her own zanpakutō sword soul as the core. After all, in terms of affinity, the zanpakutō sword spirit is born in the soul of the owner, and has the characteristic of being lost together with the owner. However, this has returned to the most basic question: Physician doesn't even have spiritual power, so how can he awaken his zanpakutō? This is undoubtedly like a dead end, blocking the path of ordinary souls to have spiritual power. Moreover, Senju Makutō suddenly thought of a problem, that is, the unique power of the god of death is condensed, separated, and used in the way of zanpakutō. So in the more distant period when there was no zanpakutō, would the power of the god of death be used in a way that returns to its own original nature? In addition to making it easier for the gods of death to master power more quickly, will the form of zanpakutō also be a restriction on the gods of death themselves? However, Senju Makutō did not know about this long-standing question, and even Zarakisu, who was completely integrated into the entire Jingling Garden, was also unclear. It's really not that simple. Senju Makutō, who was dizzy and had a sore back from studying, walked out of the secret exit of the mansion with his waist, and his steps felt a little light. However, just as Makutō Senju had just walked to the corner outside the mansion, he saw a familiar figure. Ah, "Makao, why are you here?" Yamada Hanatame, who looked a bit like a submissive, opened his eyes wide, looked at Makao Senju in confusion and shock and asked. Especially the weak look of Makao Senju holding his waist, which made Yamada Hanatame inexplicably have some strange guesses. "Hanatame?" Seeing this, Makao Senju's expression suddenly changed, and he instantly returned to his usual gentle and easygoing demeanor, and his waist straightened up again. This made Yamada Hanatame feel dizzy, as if what he just saw was an illusion. "Hanatame, what are you doing here?" Makao Senju asked, taking the initiative. Suddenly, Yamada Hanatame, who was inexplicably panicked, hurriedly answered. "I came to visit my sister-in-law." "I see," Senju Makao nodded, and then casually asked Yamada Hanatame about the various training matters for the new team members. Under Senju Makao's continuous and detailed questions, the nervous Yamada Hanatame almost forgot his initial questions in an instant, and tried hard to answer one question after another. Finally, under Yamada Hanatame's nervous and somewhat expectant gaze, Senju Makao patted Yamada Hanatame on the shoulder and said, "Well done. Hanatame, as expected, you can come to the 4th Division from the Mao Spiritual Academy, which is really a great help." Yamada Hanatame only felt his chest warm, and replied with emotion. No, it's all because of Makao-kun's good guidance, and I can't live up to Makao-kun's trust. No, this is all Hanatame's own efforts, please continue to work hard in the future and play a role. Senju Makao said encouragingly. After all, if Yamada Hanatame didn't work hard, how could Senju Makao have so much free time to do private research and drink tea and arrange flowers with Unohana teacher every day? Yamada Hanatame said excitedly. Yes, Makao-kun, I will definitely work hard, and I will definitely always work hard to support Makao-kun even in the Attack Makao Association. Wait, Senju Makao, who was originally planning to slip away, suddenly heard some extraordinary words and asked in shock and surprise. What association? Makao-kun doesn't know? Attack Makao Association. Yamada Hanatame said with some surprise. The full name seems to be Special Communication Association for Attacking Senju Doctors, but recently the president intends to expand the scale and formalize it, and is preparing to change the name at the suggestion of Captain Unohana. Senju Makao. Unohana teacher's suggestion, under Chapter 230 must be banned. Makao Senju's first reaction, Unohana-sensei actually joined the so-called Attack Makao Association. What does she want to do? Second reaction. Why do I seem to be the one who knows the least about the Attack Makao Association and the entire 4th Division? At this moment, Makao Senju's expression is really weird, especially, Unohana-sensei seems to have participated in it, which is really scary. Fortunately, Makao Senju has always kept a distance from the so-called Attack Makao Association and has almost no contact with the Attack Makao Association. Speaking of which, Makao-kun really doesn't know about the Attack Makao Association. Yamada Hanatame said with some doubt on his face. It's strange. Obviously, everyone has asked Captain Unohana to personally invite Makao-kun to participate in the association's activities many times, but Captain Unohana always refused because Makao-kun had to study and didn't have time. Makao Senju. Ahem, Senju Makao coughed lightly, but he naturally didn't dare to expose Unohana Retsu. He showed a look of sudden enlightenment on his face and said, "Now that you mention it, I seem to have some impression. Unohana teacher asked me about it, but I was usually busy, so I subconsciously turned down all unfamiliar event invitations." Suddenly, Yamada Hanatame said with admiration as if he had learned something. As expected of Makao-kun, no wonder Makao-kun was promoted to the position of vice captain in a short period of time. Everyone only sees Makao-kun's superficial beauty and gentleness, but they don't know how much hard work Makao-kun has put in behind the scenes. Then, Yamada Hanatame took out a small notebook from his arms, wrote down carefully, and said, "No, I have to write this down. When the next regular association activity starts to share various interesting things about Makao-kun, I will share this case." Senju Makao saw this. I just felt a mouthful of complaints and didn't know how to spit it out. Your association is really too boring, right? However, when Senju Makao thought of the crazy fan behaviors in his previous life, he suddenly felt that this kind of association activity could be regarded as rational and elegant. But I was obviously walking the route of gentle and powerful. How could I suddenly embark on this strange road relying on my appearance and temperament? Suddenly, Senju Makotao realized something and said, Teacher Unohana also often participates in the association activities of sharing interesting stories. Yamada Hanatem nodded and said, Yes, every time I participated, Captain Unohana was not absent, and Captain Unohana was also that venue for each association activity and the provider of tea, food and other things. In an instant, Senju Makotao felt cold sweat all over his body. My fan club, inexplicably, didn't this become Teacher Unohana's eyes and ears? This made Senju Makotao suddenly have the illusion that his wife had become the head of the fan club. If he really had intense behavior with some fans, he would probably be known by Teacher Unohana in an instant. Of course, Teacher Unohana is not Senju Makotao's wife yet, but this is obviously worse. No, this evil organization must be resolutely banned and cracked down. Senju Makotao almost subconsciously came up with this idea. Of course, it was not that Senju Makotao was afraid of the large number of spies controlled by Unohana teacher, but that he thought this was purely a low-level interest and an association organization without any positive meaning. However, in the entire GOTY 13, even Yamamoto Janrai Shichikuni might not dare to force Unohana Retsu to do anything. This also led to the fact that even if he reported or complained about this back association to the First Division, the relevant reporting information would probably be quickly passed to Unohana Retsu, and Unohana Retsu would be allowed to deal with it on his own. However, Senju Makotao's thoughts moved, and his eyes narrowed slightly. No, it's not impossible to do this. Whether that boring association can be cancelled is one thing, but at least it can indirectly and convincingly prove his position and innocence to Unohana Retsu. As for me, I have never thought of doing anything to those fans, absolutely not. Really not. Then, after returning to his vice-captain's office, Makotao Senju did not hesitate to submit a document to the First Division in the name and position of the vice-captain of the Fourth Division. The content of the document stated that Makotao Senju had discovered the existence of such an improper association, and righteously described the various disadvantages of this association, pointing out that it had already had an impact on the operation of the 4th Division, and requested the 1st Division to ban and crack down on it. As expected by Makotao Senju, this document was directly submitted to the 1st Division and it was like a stone sinking into the sea. Makotao Senju had been waiting for more than half a month, and there was still no response to the document. Until one night when the moonlight was beautiful, Makotao Senju and Unohana Retsu were drinking tea and appreciating flowers in the courtyard. Unohana Retsu took out the document and handed it to Makotao Senju. Sure enough, as expected, the document unexpectedly returned to Unohana Retsu's hands. No matter which world it is, some rules and human nature will always be unexpectedly similar. Unohana Retsu held the teacup in both hands, with a gentle look of peace and quiet, and gently sipped the tea and said, Makotao, take a look at this document. Makotao Senju opened the document and browsed the contents, with just the right amount of surprise on his face, and asked, Teacher, this document seems to be the one I submitted to the first team more than half a month ago. Yes, because the first team was unable to approve it at the moment, they forwarded the document directly to me. After a pause, Unohana Retsu spoke gently. Makotao, don't you like this association? I think it's quite interesting. Makotao Senju blinked and replied, I can't say I hate it, but I have no contact with this association, but it seems that my name is mentioned in it, so I'm worried that someone will use my name to deceive or smear it. After a pause, Makotao Senju said helplessly with a hint of meaning, in order to prevent someone from being deceived, it is more appropriate to abolish this association. Unohana Retsu raised her beautiful eyes, but she faintly heard the implicit meaning of Makotao Senju. The news in the association is unreliable and exaggerated. Teacher Unohana can't believe it. Even if there is any news that is unfavorable to me, it is definitely a rumor. Actually, this association is quite interesting. I occasionally pay attention to it. It does mention some interesting information related to Makotao, such as, Unohana Retsu put down the teacup in his hand and said with a smile, Makotao seems to have a lot of experience in acupuncture. Chapter 231 Assessment of Acupuncture Techniques. Senju Makotao. Even though Senju Makotao's character had long been tempered to the point of being unperturbed by the repeated stimulation and temptation of Asian Sasuke and Unohana Retsu, when he suddenly heard Unohana Retsu mention this matter, Senju Makotao's eyes twitched subconsciously. Actually, it's all because of Unohana teacher's good teaching. Senju Makotao answered modestly. but I don't remember teaching Makoutō about acupuncture. Unohana Retsu said with a smile. Is Makoutō's acupuncture level really up to standard? Or do you have other ideas and simply want to take the opportunity to study other people's spirits? Teacher, you're joking. If it weren't for Unohana teachers teaching me about medical skills and spirits, I wouldn't have been able to learn acupuncture by myself. After a pause, Senju Makoutō calmly took a sip of tea and said, besides, everything is for the sake of the doctor and the patient. Acupuncture can assist in treatment and achieve an immediate adjustment of the spiritual body structure. Unohana Retsu nodded and said with some curiosity, in that case, I will test Cheng's acupuncture level today. Suddenly, Senju Cheng's heart subconsciously surged with ecstasy. Acupuncture, then it is inevitable to contact the skin, and some acupuncture positions are not only the back, but also include the front chest, lower abdomen, head and other positions. More importantly, Senju Cheng has never had the opportunity to hurt Unohana Retsu in the past and then treat him to integrate the forest seed. In other words, is this a great time to sow seeds to Unohana teacher? Then it's troublesome. Senju Cheng's voice, which was forced to suppress his excitement, was slightly trembling. In that case, then Cheng, follow me. Then, under the leadership of Unohana Retsu, Senju Cheng and Unohana Retsu are led to the medical research room on the side of the courtyard. There are a lot of medical books collected or written by Unohana Retsu, and there are also many necessary instruments for treatment. There is also a special medical bed in the center of the room. Suddenly, Makoutō Senju couldn't help looking at Unohana Retsu with an expectant look. Lie down, teacher Unohana, I will definitely show you what I have learned in my life. However, Unohana Retsu put on a pair of disposable medical gloves and looked at Makoutō Senju in surprise. Makoutō, what are you waiting for? Lie down. Ah? Makoutō Senju stayed where he was, his excited head stuck on the spot. Unohana Retsu showed an obvious dark smile and said meaningfully, does Makoutō want me to lie down and let Makoutō do acupuncture at will? That won't work. If Makoutō's skills are not proficient, it is easy to have some accidents. For a moment, Makoutō Senju completely understood what ups and downs meant. Especially when he saw Unohana Retsu's face full of evil and joyful smile, he fully understood that he probably had no chance to refuse. Then, Senju Makoutō showed a slightly forced smile and lay on the treatment bed. Then, Unohana Retsu skillfully opened Senju Makoutō's shirt, picked up a needle and stabbed it into Senju Makoutō's back, and asked, location, function, and then, it was almost a series of soul tests from Unohana Retsu. Every time he stacked a needle in a different position, Unohana Retsu asked Senju Makoutō to answer the corresponding position and function. Until, Senju Makoutō was almost stabbed into a porcupine, Unohana Retsu ended this temporary test and expressed his recognition of Senju Makoutō's acupuncture theory level. Senju Makoutō said casually while the needle was being pulled out, teacher, don't you want to test the practical operation? If there is anything wrong, the teacher can also give me guidance in time. Oh? Makoutō is going to conduct practical operation with me as the object. Unohana Retsu asked. Can I? At this moment, Makoutō Senju was obviously unwilling to miss this golden opportunity, and he almost wanted to give Unohana Retsu acupuncture. However, Unohana Retsu gently flipped Makoutō Senju's head and gently refused. No. Huh. For a moment, Makoutō Senju's tone revealed full of surprise and regret for not being able to learn and improve. However, Unohana Retsu seemed to think that Makoutō Senju was trying to take the opportunity to avenge the porcupine, and he completely ignored Makoutō Senju's words and said instead, in fact, in the association, I have heard a lot about Makoutō giving acupuncture to patients, but some patients obviously don't need acupuncture, but Makoutō still gives acupuncture. After a pause, Unohana Retsu said with a smile, so, I was worried about whether there were some errors in Cheng's understanding of acupuncture. Now that I know that Cheng's theory is quite solid and rich, I am relieved. As for the actual operation, there is no need to bother. Cheng-Jun has treated so many patients with acupuncture without a single medical accident, which is enough to show that Cheng's practical ability is excellent. For a moment, Senju Cheng didn't know whether he was moved by Unohana Retsu's gentle concern or felt helpless about Unohana Retsu's style of being impenetrable. Thank you, teacher. Then, Unohana Retsu suddenly thought of something and said, but Cheng's opinion is quite constructive. The name and system of the attaching association are inadequate. Hearing this, Senju Cheng felt a hint of joy in his heart. For Senju Cheng, the fact that the threatening attaching association could be abolished was undoubtedly good news. However, Unohana pondered for a moment and said with a smile, "Well, after all, this also restricts the further development and growth of the association. It is necessary to change the name and restructure so that the association can accommodate more members." Senju Makoto. However, Unohana obviously had no intention of letting Senju Makoto go, and asked, "Makoto's management ability is also quite outstanding. Do you have any ideas?" Senju Makoto thought and answered with a smile. "Unohana Association, how about it?" Unohana laughed out loud and said, "If the association is changed to this name, no one will join." "How can there be no one?" "Teacher, I will apply to be the first to join," Senju Makoto said in a positive tone. Unohana glanced at Senju Makoto unhappily, and understood that this was definitely Senju Makoto's counterattack against his joining the Attack Makoto Association, or a metaphor, revealing some similar thoughts that both parties had at the same time. "Makoto, how about changing the name? Female Death God Association." Chapter 232. Female Death God Association. Female Shinigami Association. Senju Makoto was stunned when he heard this. You know, in the original trajectory, the Female Shinigami Association was a magical organization. In name, the Female Shinigami Association was established to improve the status of female Shinigami and protect their rights. In some aspects, its influence was even more authoritative than that of the Central 46th Chamber. After all, no male Shinigami or noble would want to provoke a large number of female Shinigami. "Ah, this is not appropriate, right?" "Teacher?" Senju Makoto asked. "What's inappropriate?" "Anyway, more than 95% of the people in the Gonching Association are women." Unohana stared at Senju Makoto with a smile, and the look that seemed to have some metaphors made Senju Makoto shrink his neck instinctively. After all, even if Senju Makoto did not participate in the Gonching Association at all, it is completely conceivable that the topics discussed in the place where a large number of bored noble women and little fangirl Shinigami gathered may have been completely obscene. "Then, isn't there still 5% of men left?" Senju Makoto reminded. "It doesn't matter. The remaining small number will be considered as special invited members." After a pause, Unohana said, "Would you like to join the Women's Shinigami Association as a special invited member?" "This is not appropriate, right?" Unknown to Unohana thoughts, Senju Makoto refused subconsciously. "It can be appropriate." "How can it not be appropriate?" "I think Makoto will think it is appropriate," Unohana said with a smile, and there was no threat in his gentle tone. Immediately, Senju Makoto changed his firm position without hesitation and answered, "If the teacher thinks it is appropriate, then I think it is appropriate too." "What a good disciple, then come with me to participate in the association activities in 3 days, and explain that it was Makoto who proposed the name change," Unohana said, and then pulled out the last needle that was stuck in Senju Makoto's neck, and then left leisurely, leaving Senju Makoto, who realized belatedly that he was almost completely played by Unohana. Although Unohana has a very high reputation and fame in the Seireitei, the person who truly has the highest influence in the Attaching Association is undoubtedly Senju Makoto, who has never appeared before. Therefore, if Unohana wants to change the name of the Attaching Association, then it is obviously only possible if Senju Makoto personally proposes it, otherwise a large number of other Attaching Association members may not have objections. Then, a piece of news quickly spread within the Attaching Association. After many invitations from Captain Unohana, Dr. Senju decided to take out his precious time to participate in the next regular association event, and Dr. Senju seemed to be planning to announce some important news at the association event. For a while, the members who were impressed by Senju Makoto's medical skills, appearance, temperament, hard work, gentleness, etc., and joined the association were ready to take time to participate in the next association meeting. Even as the news spread more and more widely, some dev gods who were not originally members of the Attaching Association were also attracted. 3 days passed in a flash. Unohana didn't give Makoto Senju a chance to escape. He caught Makoto Senju early in the morning and took him to the association's activity venue in a large conference room in the 4th squad's dormitory. "Makoto, what to say and what not to say, I don't think you need the teacher to teach you a little bit, right?" Unohana said with concern. "Don't worry, teacher, I will stand on the same side as the teacher." Makoto Senju expressed his attitude without hesitation. As Unohana Retsu and Makoto Senju arrived in the conference room in advance, Ioki Riza, who was nominally the president of the Attack Makoto Association, was already leading some members to set up the venue. A lot of tea, snacks, cakes, of course, these are not the point. The point is the huge portrait hanging behind that podium, which is a high-definition enlarged picture that Ioki Riza secretly took at some point. In the background of the former gynecological office, rays of sunlight fell on Makoto Senju, and Makoto Senju showed a gentle and brilliant smile on his face, as if the whole person was completely integrated with the sunlight. I have to say that Ioki Riza's candid photography skills are absolutely first-rate. It's just too embarrassing. Even with Senju Makoto's thick skin, when he thought of the embarrassing scenes, Senju Makoto couldn't help but blush, and the whole person froze in place. How is it, Makoto? Unohana Retsu, who was standing beside Senju Makoto, said softly. The photos of each association activity are different. Are these taken secretly by Riza? Or did you deliberately pose for them? Teacher, I definitely don't know. Senju Makoto said with a smile. At this moment, Ioki Riza also noticed the appearance of Unohana Retsu and Senju Makoto, and greeted them excitedly, even with a blushing face. Captain Unohana, Makoto, come on, take a seat. Then, under the excited and enthusiastic leadership of Ioki Riza, Unohana Retsu and Senju Makoto were taken to a best seating area prepared in advance. Mr. Makoto, are you satisfied with these arrangements and decorations? Today's association activities will definitely be unprecedentedly lively. Ioki Riza's tone of seeking credit was as if she were saying to Senju Makoto, look, this is all the great empire I have built for you, ahem. Senju Makoto, who was sitting next to Unohana Retsu, couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. After all, Ioki Riza's attitude and tone always made it seem like Senju Makoto was the promoter and controller behind the Attack on Makoto Association. However, before Senju Makoto could answer Ioki Riza, he indirectly clarified himself to Unohana Retsu. As the first group of Attack on Makoto Association members arrived, they almost all gathered in the direction of Senju Makoto without any prior agreement. Wow! Dr. Kaihanshou, I didn't expect Dr. Kaihanshou to really come, that's great. Dr. Kaihanshou, long time no see, do you still remember me? Last time, I was completely healed by you, Dr. Kaihanshou, from the inside out. Dr. Kaihanshou, when are you free to give me a massage again? Faintly, Kaihanshou Makoto seemed to see that Unohana Retsu, who had already sat down, was forcibly squeezed out by this group of noble young women. In an instant, whether it was because of the voices of the large group of noble young women who surrounded him or because of the gentle eyes from Unohana Retsu, Kaihanshou Makoto's forehead could hardly stop sweating. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 233, Captains arriving one after another. It has to be said that since Senju Makoto was promoted to the vice captain of the 4th Division, with the improvement of his status, it is naturally impossible to harass Senju Makoto in the gynecology department at any time like in the past. Therefore, many noble ladies who participated in the Attack Makoto Association saw Senju Makoto alive again, and his chest muscles were also very resilient. How could they not be excited? Senju Makoto felt that he was surrounded for less than a few breaths, and he felt that his muscles had been tempered and repeatedly collided. More importantly, there was a Unohana Retsu who was squeezed out next to him. If it were an environment without Unohana teacher, Senju Makoto might have the patience to slowly soothe the excited hearts of these noble ladies in a gentle way. However, at this moment, when Senju Makoto was about to forcefully get rid of it, Brother Cheng, a crisp lily voice sounded, and then Senju Makoto saw a group of pink little cuties rushing towards his head. The next moment, Kusaka Yarai was almost like a face hugger, hugging the only face of Senju Makoto exposed. Flat pat for the brain, Makoto Senju, who was almost unable to breathe due to the tablet being covered, almost subconsciously thought of this word. However, Kusaka Yaru, who did not understand Makoto Senju's feelings at all, kept rubbing his pink little head against Makoto Senju and said, Makoto, you haven't come to play with me for a long time. Yaru, let go first, I can't breathe. I promise I will go to the 11th Division to play with you as soon as I have time. Makoto Senju replied with a voice that was a little changed due to the tablet being covered. Really? Makao, you can't lie to me, this is already an agreement. Hey, it's an agreement, Yaru. However, Makao Senju, whose vision was completely blocked by the tablet, did not notice that Unohana Retsu was almost emitting black air. Once upon a time, Unohana Retsu's name was called Unohana Yaru. Now, Senju Makao has so intimately made an agreement with others in the name of Yarai, which undoubtedly made Unohana Retsu feel extremely unhappy. Of course, although Unohana Retsu's face was faintly emitting black air, his expression was more and more gentle, watching Senju Makao's every move. And at this moment, a somewhat impatient and irritable voice sounded at the door, accompanied by a burst of unbridled wild spiritual pressure that swept the whole place. It's so noisy here. Hey, Yarai, is this where you want to play? In an instant, the entire meeting room was silent, and everyone subconsciously looked towards the door. The one who appeared at the door was the captain of the 11th Division, Kinpuchi Zaraki, with a jagged zanpakutō on his shoulders and messy, hedgehog-like long hair draped behind him, as if a man-eating beast had arrived at the hunting ground. Shaoji no Nikusaka Yarai seemed to be unaffected. He turned his head to Kinpuchi Zaraki to indicate his position, and then said, "Brother Makao is really here, and he has promised to come to the 11th Division to play with me." Huh. Kinpuchi Zaraki's eyes turned, and his tall and burly body strode towards Senju Makao. Under the amazing and violent momentum and spiritual pressure of Kinpuchi Zaraki, the noble ladies who had originally surrounded Senju Makao subconsciously made way. However, at this moment, Unohana Retsu stepped in front of Kinpuchi Zaraki with elegant and gentle steps, and just looked at Kinpuchi Zaraki quietly. Kinpuchi Zaraki stopped his steps, but his spiritual pressure became more and more unstable, as if it would explode at any time. Are Captain Unohana and Captain Zaraki here too? Suddenly, a gentle voice came over, breaking the aura that seemed to be in confrontation, and calming the atmosphere of the entire meeting room. The next moment, Aiden Sosok, wearing the 5th Division Captain's Aori and black-framed glasses, walked in with the 5th Division's Vice-Captain Jin Ichimura who was following him. Unlike Kinpuchi Zaraki's arrogance and barbarity, Aiden Sosok bowed slightly at the door of the meeting room, and then asked gently, "I wonder if I can listen to your association's activities on the side?" Ioki Riza, who had just reacted, hurriedly went up and said, "Of course, you can, you are very welcome, Captain Aizen, please take a seat." Then, Ioki Riza hurriedly led Aizen Sosok and Ichimura Jin to the seat on the other side of Senju Makao. However, when Aizen Sosok passed by Unohana Retsu and Kinpuchi Zaraki, he first nodded slightly to Unohana Retsu, and then said to Kinpuchi Zaraki gently, "Captain Zaraki, you still have to restrain your spiritual pressure a little here, otherwise it is easy to accidentally hurt innocent people." As soon as these words came out, the perception of the gentle and elegant Aizen Sosok in the room instantly rose. Being in a high position, but knowing how to take care of the weak is undoubtedly a quality that can easily gain the favor of others. Especially, the weak. Aiden Sosok felt the subtle changes in the eyes of the people around him, pushed his glasses, and his eyes seemed to meet Senju Makao who was looking at him inadvertently. Aiden Sosok's mouth slightly floated up, revealing a smile that was not as gentle as usual, but full of kindness and playfulness. Then, Aiden Sosok sat on the other side of Senju Makao, which was almost opposite to Unohana Retsu, and then took a look at the huge photo of Senju Makao hanging high, and commented, "Makao-kun, this photo is quite good." After a pause, Aiden Sosok crossed his hands to support his chin, and then asked, "When did Makao-kun establish such an organization? He didn't even invite me to join. I wonder if Makao-kun will agree if I apply to join now." Senju Makao. Inexplicably, Senju Makao always felt that Aiden Sosok seemed to be hinting at something, and was talking to him about some very dangerous topics. Captain Aizen seems to have misunderstood something. First of all, Senju Makao put one hand on his thigh in advance, and while his palm was inadvertently stroking Kusaka Yarai, he answered, "This association has nothing to do with me. It was completely established by Riza privately for fun. So even if Captain Aizen is interested in joining and learning more about it, he didn't apply to me." Aiden Sosok smiled, and had a completely non-committal attitude towards Senju Makao's answer. Chapter 234 Willing to be the fire-bearer. As for this so-called Special Exchange Association for Strategies for Senju Doctors, Aiden Sosok really didn't pay much attention to such an inconspicuous and strange organization before. After all, no matter how it develops, it can only be regarded as a fraternity. However, with Unohana-Retsu's recent proposal to formalize the association at the captain's meeting, and to support the establishment of associations in the GOTY 13 to strengthen the exchanges between members of different divisions, this made Days and Sosok realize something: associations are undoubtedly in existence whose influence can easily cross the barriers of divisions. Once the influence of a certain association can completely cover the nobles and the GOTY 13 at the same time. At the time, whether the majesty of the central 46th chamber is greater, or whether the influence of a certain association is wider, it will be a question. Later, Aiden Sosok noticed that the largest self-built association in the Seireitei is actually the Special Exchange Association for Strategies for Senju Doctors, and its members almost include nobles from different divisions and different classes at the same time. The only point that puzzled Days and Sosok was that the number of men in this zanpakutō association was relatively small, and more than 95% were women. However, Aiden Sosok immediately understood the cleverness of Senju Makutō. Hidden behind the scenes, secretly manipulating his subordinate Yokiriza to serve as the president, and Unohana-Retsu as the mouthpiece facing the top leaders of the GOTY 13th Division. In addition, there is no doubt that men in the Seireitei are in charge of most of the status and rights compared to women. The small number of men in the association will not cause fear and vigilance from the Central 46th Chamber and Captain General Yamamoto. Now that Captain General Yamamoto has agreed to the formalization of the association and will provide support, the zanpakutō association has undoubtedly gained an absolute advantage. By then, relying on the special advantages of the association, Senju Makutō will undoubtedly unknowingly gain influence and power in the Seireitei that far exceeds that of ordinary captains. Smart. This is undoubtedly the evaluation made by Aiden Sosok after he has sorted out the development trajectory of the entire attack on Makutō Association. Make plans at the subtle points, wait for the thunder, and establish the general trend with an unexpected momentum. Especially, Aiden Sosok took another look at the super large photo of Senju Makutō. This seemingly reasonable and unobtrusive approach is undoubtedly quietly engraving the mark of Senju Makutō in the depths of the entire attack on Makutō Association to ensure Senju Makutō's transcendent status and influence in the association. Sure enough, Makutō-kun, you have never considered being inferior to others from the beginning, right? Aiden Sosok poured himself a cup of tea, and while tasting it carefully, his eyes behind the glasses flickered slightly. Could it be that Makutō-kun's goal was to target the Seireitei from the beginning, intending to seize control of the entire Soul Society? With the appearance of Aiden Sosok, the confrontation between Unohana-Retsu and Zaraka Kinpuchi was interrupted, especially when they saw Kusaka Yaoru sitting on Senju Makutō's thigh. For a moment, both Unohana-Retsu and Zaraka Kinpuchi seemed to have a change of mood. However, Zaraka Kinpuchi did not say anything in the end, but just found a seat and sat down. But as Zaraka Kinpuchi sat down, the circle of seats near Zaraka Kinpuchi was almost empty, and no one dared to stay. And as Unohana-Retsu and Aiden Sosok sat on the left and right sides of Senju Makutō, the two captain-level Shinigami also blocked the enthusiasm of many members of the zanpakutō Association. Soon, the large conference room that was originally used to accommodate the entire 4th Division to participate in the meeting became full. Different divisions, nobles of various classes, this made Aiden Sosok, who had already had quite a lot of guesses in his heart, almost completely confirmed it. If I'm not mistaken, what Makutō-kun will do next is, Aiden Sosok turned his gaze and looked at Senju Makutō who was walking up to the podium. Senju Makutō, standing on the podium, was greeted by pairs of burning eyes, and inexplicably felt like he was holding a concert. First of all, thank you very much for coming. Senju Makutō first said a few polite words, expressing his welcome and gratitude to the zanpakutō Association, and then changed his tone and continued. But, when I learned about the existence of this association, I tossed and turned for a long time. It wasn't pure excitement and joy, but a feeling of slight uneasiness and nervousness. I'm just a small doctor. I only need to do my essential job to the best of my ability, save lives, and witnessing everyone's joyful and excited smiles is the greatest satisfaction for me. However, now I actually have a little influence. Influence is responsibility, and also obligation. So maybe I should do something else. Senju Makutō spoke in a sincere and gentle tone, as if he was telling his own inner thoughts, and the audience present began to resonate vaguely. Therefore, I propose to rename the Special Communication Association for the Thousand Hands Doctored to the Female Death God Association. The association will establish the purpose to take equality, mutual assistance, friendship and harmony as the core values, and then safeguard the rights and interests of women and improve the status of women. Perhaps, this will be a lofty goal. But I am willing to be a fire bearer, and everyone here will also be that little spark, but as long as it can be lit up a little, it is not meaningless. For a moment, in the voice of Senju Cheng that seemed to be extremely gentle, the audience present only felt their eyes moisten unconsciously, and a certain flame ignited in their hearts. Willing to be a fire bearer, you will be that little spark, light up a little, it is not meaningless. These words full of bewitching power seemed to have some kind of magic, completely allowing these listeners who experienced repetitive and boring days day after day in the jingling court to find some kind of goal to pursue for a lifetime. Looking at Senju Cheng on the podium, it was as if I saw a glowing spiritual mentor. Aiden Sosop showed a knowing smile, and then he took the lead and gently applauding Senju Cheng. Pa 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 pa. Instantly, a series of loud and enthusiastic applause echoed in the huge conference room. Soul Society has lasted for so long, will it finally welcome a fire bearer who is willing to speak for women? The female Shinigami and noble ladies present were particularly touched. Chapter 235 President Selection. Only, Senju Cheng, standing on the podium, looked at the scene in front of him, which seemed to be filled with enthusiasm, and was a little confused. No, I just borrowed a little bit of the speaking skills related to the women's organization in my previous life, purely to avoid the subsequent strong protests that would be almost equivalent to disbanding the Attack Macau Association. Why, it seems that the scene has become a little bit wrong. Could it be that this is because the Seireitei is still a virgin land where women's independent consciousness has not awakened, so it has touched the hearts of the audience at once? For a moment, Senju Cheng faced those pairs of extremely hot eyes and completely understood the next voting decision in his plan. The plan to divert the contradiction seemed a little redundant. Obviously, in order to avoid unexpected results, Senju Cheng could not satisfy Unohana Retsu, and even prepared a voting box that could be cheated in advance. It was a complete waste. Just when Senju Cheng had no idea what to do next, a charming noble lady stood up and shouted, "Dr. Senju, please be the president of the Female Death God Association." "That's right, we will follow that president and devote our lives to protecting women's rights and improving women's status." "Dr. Senju, I can't do it anymore." Apart from some strange voices that were not quite right, facing the wave after wave of calls from the audience asking Senju Cheng to serve as the president of the Female Death God Association, Senju Cheng was completely numb. Senju Cheng had no intention of being a fighter at all. Then, Senju Cheng quickly winked at Ryoki Riza, the president and founder of the Attack Macau Association, hoping that Ryoki Riza would cooperate to come up to ease Senju Cheng's situation and serve as the president of the Female Death God Association. However, at this moment, Ryoki Riza's face was full of fanaticism. No one understands the difficulties of women in the jingling court better than Ryoki Riza. With the early death of her father, the entire Ryoki family only left Kyoko Ryoki and Riza Ryoki to depend on each other. How many difficulties did her mother encounter along the way, and how much ridicule did Ryoki Riza encounter? Especially when Kyoko Ryoki's death left Ryoki Riza alone to support the entire Ryoki family, she understood the feeling even more deeply. Senju Cheng's words almost completely reached the deepest part of Ryoki Riza's heart. Macau-kun. In an instant, looking at Ryoki Riza's fanatical shouting, Senju Cheng knew that Ryoki Riza might not be reliable this time, and she would even be the one who was most eager to push Senju Cheng to the president of the Female Death God Association. In desperation, Senju Cheng slightly pressed down his hands, calmed the chaotic scene a little, and spoke. First, in order to maintain the most basic purity of the Female Death God Association, the president must be a woman, in order to avoid the joke of an amateur managing an expert, and for the sake of funness. At this point, Senju Cheng paused. Originally, Senju Cheng subconsciously prepared to vote, but suddenly realized that with his influence, he might be voted in unanimously. Therefore, Senju Cheng changed his tone and said, "So, I think the most important thing for the president is purity, to ensure that the association will not fall into a tool for power struggles, and thus always implement the association's purpose." Senju Cheng pondered, his eyes turned around, and finally fell on Kusaka Yaru, who was eating snacks and watching with interest, and said, "I propose. Kusaka Yaru, the vice-captain of the 11th Division, should be the president of the Female Death God Association." After a pause, Senju Cheng continued. "Of course, anyone who objects can raise their hands." For a moment, the whole scene was quiet, but no one raised their hands to express opposition. Of course, Senju Cheng also understood that this was not because of the high prestige of the pink little lily Kusaka Yaru, but purely a question of rhetoric skills. If Senju Cheng asked to agree to raise their hands, then I'm afraid that few people would support such an outrageous decision. However, Senju Cheng asked those who opposed to raise their hands, so in order to avoid standing on a completely opposite position to Senju Cheng, no one would raise their hands. Very good, since everyone has no objection, it's decided. As for the subsequent internal management structure and management system of the Female Death God Association, it will be considered and announced by President Kusaka Yarai. After saying that, Senju Cheng hurriedly left the podium. Kusaka Yarai, who was in the audience, held his fingers in his mouth and blinked his big eyes. He still hasn't reacted to what happened. What, President? Kusaka Yarai sat back on Senju Cheng's thighs again and asked cutely. Well, Senju Cheng explained with Kusaka Yarai's way of thinking. It means that there will be many people playing with Yarai in the future. I see, I accept it, thank you, Cheng. Listening to the exchange between Senju and Yarai Kusaka, Aiden Sosok undoubtedly had a better understanding of this friend. Of course, it was not that Senju's a little lover, but that Senju had amazing strategies and state of mind. Obviously, Senju could easily become the president of the Female Death God Association, and it is foreseeable that the purpose of this association will surely attract and influence countless women in the Seireitei. Therefore, the status, reputation, power and other benefits brought by this are obvious, but Senju refused the position of president and used this more sophisticated way to control the Female Death God Association. The 4th Division is not in harmony with the 11th Division, and Unohana and King Pachizaraki just had a confrontation, which is enough to prove that the possibility of collusion between Senju and Yarai Kusaka is very small. This is enough to further reduce the possibility of Senju making the Central 46th Chamber wary. What's more, the purpose proposed by Senju is also quite positive, and the Central 46th Chamber has no reason to target Senju. However, let alone the fact that it seems not difficult to deceive the Lily Kusaka Yarai, what's more important is that with Kusaka Yarai's character and ability, how can he really control the entire Female Death God Association? Therefore, although Senju is only the initiator of the Female Death God Association, if Aizen Sosok's prediction is correct, the entire association will eventually fall into the hands of Senju and Unohana. What an admirable blueprint, Makao-kun. Aizen Sosok's lenses reflected the full figure of Senju, and he silently admired. Chapter 236 Beautiful Painting. As Senju finished his speech, the focus of the entire event shifted. All the members of the Attack Makao Association had light in their eyes and flames in their hearts, and they discussed the purpose that Senju said. That feeling, not to say dry wood meets fire, long drought meets rain, it's like the feeling of wandering for half a lifetime and finally meeting an organization. In the end, when Okiriza announced the end of the event, many members went away in 2s and 3s, and they were still discussing. Senju hurriedly left with Unohana, fearing that if he stayed any longer, he would be blocked in a corner by those female death gods or noble ladies. It was not until he returned to the familiar and reassuring courtyard that Senju breathed a sigh of relief. However, before Senju could find an excuse to slip back to the room, Unohana stopped Senju with a gentle smile on his face. Old teacher, do you have any other instructions? Senju said inexplicably with a guilty conscience. After all, Senju had been hit by many flesh bombs and attacked from the front and back in front of Unohana in the meeting room before. For a disciple, being so rude in front of the teacher is undoubtedly a bit disqualified. Finally, the reason why Senju always sits on Kusaka Hakurai with Kusaka Hakurai on his lap is that he is using Kusaka Hakurai as a shield. After all, no matter what, you can't do something rude and excessive in front of this little lily Kusaka Hakurai, right? But even so, Senju still can't help but worry that Unohana will settle the score later with his black belly. However, to Senju surprise, Unohana stood side by side with Senju and one of his hands caught a piece of cherry blossom fallen from the air and twisted it between his fingers, and asked in a gentle and serious tone. Makao, what are your future plans for the Female Shinigami Association? Senju was somewhat surprised by Unohana tone, but his eyes could not help but fall on Unohana fingers twisting the cherry blossoms. The cherry blossoms were beautiful, and the fingers set off by the cherry blossom petals were even more beautiful. Slender, white, soft, and boneless, it was impossible to tell that these were the fingers that could easily kill ordinary captain-level Shinigami with a zanpakutō. After waiting for Makoto Senju's answer for a long time, Yuna Hanaretsu glanced at Makoto Senju, and then followed Makoto Senju's gaze to find that he was actually looking at the cherry blossoms, or his own fingers. "Does it look good?" Yuna Hanaretsu deliberately said in a sinister tone, intending to appreciate Makoto Senju's embarrassment. However, Makoto Senju, who was a little distracted at the moment, said unconsciously, "Extremely beautiful." For a moment, Yuna Hanaretsu's expression paused, his gentle eyes subconsciously evaded a little, and a piece of unnoticeable cherry blossom seemed to float on his cheeks. Makoto, who always spoke in a tactful and obscure way, suddenly said such straightforward words, which undoubtedly caught Yuna Hanaretsu off guard, and made Yuna Hanaretsu subconsciously think that this was undoubtedly the truth. Then, Yuna Hanaretsu seemed to have thought of something, and asked in a tone that was completely unremarkable. "Does Makoto usually capture the hearts of all the members of the Attack Makoto Association in this way?" However, after saying this, Yuna Hanaretsu suddenly realized that there were some errors in his words. He seems to be a member of the Attack Makoto Association. However, Senju Makoto obviously did not notice this problem. After reacting, he hurriedly explained, "Misunderstanding, teacher, there are also male members in that association. Who knows if Makoto has developed some ideas that transcend normal ethics?" Yuna Hanaretsu said. Senju Makoto looked at his beloved teacher with gentle and sincere eyes, and answered sincerely, "No, absolutely not." Yuna Hanaretsu did not speak, but slowly let go of the cherry blossom in his hand, and then walked towards the canopy-like cherry tree in the courtyard. This cherry tree was specially transplanted and planted after the reconstruction of the courtyard. The cherry tree that was originally planted in the Shifen Yuan courtyard has a lifespan of hundreds of years. It can be said to be the most beautiful and oldest cherry tree in the entire Jingling Garden. In the past, Yuna Hanaretsu was only impressed that Senju Makoto could dig a tree and find the Shifen Yuan family. Now, Yuna Hanaretsu has a vague feeling, perhaps Makoto likes cherry blossoms very much, so he specially transplanted the best cherry blossom tree for his courtyard. Then Yuna Hanaretsu stood under the cherry tree, then turned and looked at Senju Makoto. A breeze blew by, and the cherry blossoms kept dancing around Yuna Hanaretsu in the wind. Yuna Hanaretsu stroked a few strands of hair with his fingers, looked at Senju Makoto with gentle eyes, and asked again, "Makoto, what do you think about the Female Death God Association? What are your plans for the various purposes you mentioned in your speech?" Senju Makoto heard this, and his eyes flickered slightly. If it is said that before Senju Makoto really came into contact with the Otakonching Association, Senju Makoto had no such idea at all. A niche club would undoubtedly not be able to really make any waves. However, after today's contract, especially after Senju Makoto announced that it would change its name to the Female Death God Association and said the slogan and purpose that were originally prepared casually, the almost fanatical reaction of those members of the Otakonching Association undoubtedly made Senju Makoto realize a certain possibility. However, Senju Makoto's established plan is undoubtedly to slowly accumulate spiritual power through the forest seed and completely complete the extreme spirit body as the top priority and the most important thing. Therefore, Senju Makoto did not hesitate to give up the position of the president of the Female Death God Association, and there was no intention to hide his shortcomings. Senju Makoto undoubtedly has no good feelings for the power structure of the Seireitei and the Central 46th Room. Maybe Senju Makoto doesn't care about being inferior to others, but that is limited to letting Yuna Hanaretsu be on top, but it obviously does not include the puppets of the Central 46th Room. However, Senju Makoto's clear and cautious mind also made him realize that it was far from the right time for him to speak loudly in the Seireitei. However, Senju Makoto seemed to be looking at the beautiful and gentle painting in front of him at this moment, and his eyes softened involuntarily. If time continues to flow like this, it seems that the so-called power and status will not be worth mentioning. What do you think, teacher? However, what Senju Makoto did not expect was that Yuna Hanaretsu, who looked gentle and elegant with his hands hidden in his sleeves, spoke with a hint of sharpness. The Female Death God Association may be able to change the current status and rights of women in Soul Society to a certain extent, and it may also become a force controlled by Makoto. Chapter 237. Studying Medicine Can't Save Soul Society. Senju Makoto. It must be said that this is the first time that Senju Makoto has seen Yuna Hanaretsu speak so sharply. Unlike his usual gentleness and bloodlust when he draws his sword, Yuna Hanaretsu's gentle eyes at this moment seem to hide a trace of contempt. Perhaps, Unohana teacher did not have the slightest good impression of the so-called Central 46 Chambers and the aristocratic class from the beginning. In an instant, Senju Cheng recalled Unohana Retsu's past. Like Senju Cheng, Unohana Retsu, who now looks gentle and elegant, also came from Rukongei, and walked along the way stepping on countless corpses and limbs. It would be incredible if such an unprecedented villain in the Soul Society really had all for the existing power class or rule system. Senju Cheng's eyes flashed, although it was undoubtedly too early to rashly touch the existing class system of the Soul Society. However, if there was the support of Unohana Retsu, it would undoubtedly be a completely different situation. As the only first-generation captain of the 13th Gotti Squad, Unohana Retsu's strength, status, and prestige are completely different from those of ordinary captains. Even the Central 46, the Four Nobles, and even Aizen Sosok, who despises and plays with the entire Soul Society, all attach great importance to Unohana Retsu. Senju Cheng pondered for a moment and said something meaningful. Teacher, studying medicine can cure the spirits of patients one after another, but it cannot save the Soul Society. Unohana Retsu heard this and a gentle smile appeared on his lips. Obviously, from this obscure word, Unohana Retsu interpreted the thoughts and positions that Senju Cheng wanted to express. In that case, how about the Female Death God Association set up a chairman system? It just so happens that the 4th Division's team affairs are all handled by the diligent and responsible Vice Captain Senju, so I will temporarily serve as the chairman. After these words came out, Senju Cheng was delighted that he had unknowingly walked on the same path as Unohana teacher, but he also felt a little guilty for some reason. Diligent and responsible, Senju Cheng himself did not dare to praise himself like this. After all, most of the team affairs were handled perfectly by Kotetsuin and Yokiriza, and for some major matters left, Senju Cheng only needed to simply glance over and sign. However, with Unohana teacher's prestige and skills, once he served as the chairman of the Female Death God Association, not only would he find the biggest backer for the Female Death God Association, but he would also completely undermine the nominal chairman Kusaka Yaharu. Then, I'll trouble Unohana teacher. Senju Cheng said. Unohana Retsu smiled but said nothing, then turned slightly, facing Senju Cheng with a side profile that made it difficult to see his expression, and casually picked up the cherry blossom petals and said, Since Cheng has made an agreement with Kusaka Yaharu, when you go to complete it, you can mention this matter to Kusaka Yaharu. When mentioning this issue, Senju Cheng didn't think much about it at all. After all, Kusaka Yaharu is really just a cute little lily who loves to play and likes to give nicknames to others. Senju Cheng didn't have any extra thoughts. However, when he thought about going to the 11th Division to find Kusaka Yaharu, Senju Cheng couldn't help scratching his head and said helplessly, This agreement is really difficult to handle. I saw that when Cheng agreed to that agreement, he agreed very happily, didn't he? Unohana Retsu said with a gentle smile. There's nothing I can do. Kusaka Yaharu is really cute, and she is also called Yaharu, which makes me sometimes unable to resist, Senju Cheng said helplessly. This also made Unohana Retsu's figure seem to pause slightly, and a few gentle smiles appeared unconsciously on the corners of his mouth, which were different from his usual habits. But since you have agreed to the appointment with Yaharu, you still can't break the appointment. Go quickly. This time, Unohana Retsu's tone seemed to have a hint of ease and joy. That's right. Senju Cheng nodded in agreement, and since some directions for the Female Death God Association have been determined, it is necessary to treat it a little more seriously and determine many matters as soon as possible. In addition, although the Female Death God Association is quite reassuring with Unohana teacher in charge and management, it still needs to keep some backup and guarantees. Senju Cheng left the courtyard and headed towards the direction of the 11th Division's dormitory, while subconsciously thinking about the Female Death God Association in his head. It seems that it is necessary to hint to Riza a little, so that Riza's focus on the 4th Division's affairs will shift slightly and pay more attention to the affairs within the association. Alas! But without Riza's help, Yin's burden will be increased again. At this moment, Senju Cheng paused and looked at the empty corner at the end of the road. The next moment, the air in that corner spread out like ripples, revealing the captain of the 5th Division, Aizen Sosok, who looked gentle and elegant. Then, Aizen Sosok stepped on the ground and instantly appeared in front of Senju Cheng and said, Cheng-kun, it seems that you can easily sense my position. In this regard, Senju Cheng did not comment and did not answer Aizen Sosok's meaning. In fact, Senju Cheng's ability to sense Aizen Sosok's position is indeed related to the spirit in his zanpakutō, Kyuka Suigetsu. As long as Aizen Sosok carries his zanpakutō, Kyuka Senju Makoto can naturally easily determine Aizen Sosok's position. Captain Aizen, what a coincidence. Senju Makoto said with a hint of meaning. It's not a coincidence. Aizen Sosok pushed his glasses, smiled and said. But I guessed that Makoto-kun would go to the 11th Division to look for Kusaga Hakurai, so I waited for Makoto-kun on this necessary route. Senju Makoto's alertness soared, but he seemed to be a little confused when he asked. Oh? Captain Aizen, do you have any instructions? No, I just want to further confirm Makoto-kun's attitude. When he said this, Aizen Sosok's face rarely showed a seriousness, which made Senju Makoto's eyes narrow subconsciously. Makoto-kun, can I take the position of chairman of the Female Death God Association you founded? Senju Makoto. At this moment, it was Senju Makoto who was confused. Big pot, this is the Female Death God Association, women. You're such a big boss who plays with the entire Soul Society, and you actually want to join the Female Death God Association and want to be the chairman. P.S. After finishing typing, I will go back to my hometown to celebrate the new year, so there are only 2 updates today. Here I wish all my fellow readers a happy year of the rabbit in advance, and I also wish those readers who have not yet left for home to celebrate the new year a safe journey. Chapter 238 The Style of the 11th Squadron. Senju Makoto pushed his glasses, smiled politely, and replied. Captain Aizen, you're really a joker? It's not a joke. Makoto's Female Shinigami Association is only a Shinigami Association organization with the purpose of protecting women. It does not limit male Shinigami to join, right? I'm indeed interested in the position of chairman. After a pause, Aizen Sosok continued with a gentle smile and said. It can be seen that Makoto has some pursuit to change the current situation of Soul Society. In some cases where the pursuit is consistent, it may be possible to provide some mutual assistance with Makoto. Facing Aizen Sosok's repetition, Senju Makoto's eyes also became more serious. Aizen Sosok, what is the purpose? Pursuit of consistency. Senju Makoto will not believe that Aizen Sosok is a gentleman who is particularly caring for women. In the original trajectory that Senju Makoto remembered in his previous life, Aizen Sosok was ruthless when he chopped with his zanpakutō, whether it was a lily or a mature woman. This kind of man, no matter how you look at it, doesn't look like the kind of warrior who will fight and charge for the rights and status of women in Soul Society. More importantly, now that Makoto Senju has already regarded the Female Death God Association as a chess piece for the future, how could he allow a second chess player to play in it? I'm sorry, Captain Aizen, it's just that the candidate for the position of chairman has been preliminarily decided. It's a pity. Makoto Senju replied tactfully while keeping a distance from Aizen Sosok. Really? That's really a pity. Aizen Sosok lowered his head slightly, and his tone seemed to reveal a bit of regret that was beyond words. Makoto Senju, who was unwilling to be alone with Aizen Sosok, a dangerous existence, bowed slightly, and then disappeared directly from the spot with a flash step. Aizen Sosok did not stop Makoto Senju, but just silently watched Makoto Senju's back as he left, muttering in a low voice. Is this your answer, Makoto-kun? The future you pursue, doesn't it need 2 kings to exist in Soul Society at the same time? My friend who stands on the same level as me, since you want Soul Society, I will give it to you. I will stand in front of you as the king of Hukomundo, as long as we walk on this parallel path. Fate will push us to walk side by side, because we are the only ones in the world who can ultimately understand each other, who stand on the same level. Makoto Senju, who quickly moved away, was only slightly glad that Aizen Sosok didn't intend to catch up. In any case, it is obviously an extremely dangerous thing to get along with someone like Aizen Sosok alone. However, Makoto Senju still couldn't help but feel puzzled that Aizen Sosok would actually aspire to be the chairman of the Female Death God Association. After all, even if the Female Death God Association has a huge influence in the future, it is a predictable result, but for an existence like Aizen Sosok, it should undoubtedly still be an inconspicuous organization, not to mention being compared with the Ten Blades organization that Aizen Sosok will casually establish in the future. While Makoto Senju was thinking, he unknowingly arrived at the gate of the 11th Division's barracks guarded by 2 rows of big men. However, before Makoto Senju could bite the bullet and communicate with the group of muscular brothers in front of him, so as to allow himself to enter smoothly, Brother Makoto. As if sensing Makoto Senju's spiritual pressure, a group of pink lily rushed out of the 11th Division's barracks and hugged Makoto Senju's head again with incomparable precision. This scene also made the group of muscular brothers guarding the gate look extremely shocked. With his absolute cuteness and justice, Kusaka Yaoru has undoubtedly become the group pet and cute mascot of the entire 11th Division. However, if there were still a lot of strength-oriented brothers in the 11th Division who didn't take this little cutie seriously at the beginning. But as Kusaka Yaoru crushed all disobedience with pink violence, Kusaka Yaoru truly sat firmly in the position of vice-captain. And, there'll no longer be blind lily-controlled brothers who seem to secretly try to capture this pink lily behind King Puchizaraka's back. There are definitely not a few brothers in the 11th Division who are sent to the 4th Division for treatment because of their unauthorized and rash touch of Kusaka Yaoru. And, in the eyes of many muscular brothers, apart from King Puchizaraka, Senju Cheng is undoubtedly the first person who can make Kusaka Yaoru so close. Envy, jealousy, puzzlement, confusion. In a complex look, Senju Cheng picked up Kusaka Yaoru with one hand and held him in his arms, striding into the 11th Division's barracks. Under Kusaka Yaoru's enthusiastic introduction, Senju Cheng visited the 11th Division's barracks for the first time. Unlike the warm and quiet environment of the 4th Division, the most numerous training grounds in the 11th Division are undoubtedly various training grounds, where brothers can be seen sparring with each other everywhere. Sweat and blood are mixed and splashed, passion and hot blood collide violently, roars and groans echo in the interweaving. After a short tour, Senju Cheng couldn't help but feel extremely fortunate that his original division choice did not join the 11th Division of the Combat Division. Fighting is definitely the only theme of the entire Combat Division. In this environment, Senju Cheng couldn't help but wonder how long he could last without being turned into a brother, and even his brain capacity would degenerate and shrink in the end, right? Thinking of this, Senju Cheng couldn't help but say to Kusaka Yaoru, "Yaorai, if you have nothing to do, go to other squads more often. Don't stay in the 11th squad all the time. This is very unhealthy for your physical and mental growth." Huh? What do you mean by unhealthy? Kusaka Yaorai asked puzzledly, tapping his lips with his index finger. After a pause, Kusaka Yaorai said with some sudden realization, "Is it healthy to play games with Makoto more often?" Well, almost. At this point, Senju Cheng, who felt that he was a little suspected of kidnapping Lily, did not forget to add, "It just so happens that the Female Death God Association is about to be officially established, and Yaorai is the most important president. If you have time, find someone to play with in the association. This is also healthy." It seems to understand a little bit. Kusaka Yaorai's eyes were a little absent-minded, as if he was lost in thought. Senju Cheng continued to stroll around the 11th squad with Kusaka Yaorai in his arms, but accidentally saw a familiar figure. On a training ground, a corner of Madarome was shirtless, surrounded by 10 muscular brothers. The passion seemed to be about to erupt at any time. Chapter 239. Request from Yaorai. However, Madarome Ikaku seemed to have remembered something that Senju Cheng had said in a teasing tone. At this moment, surrounded by the muscular brothers, Madarome Ikaku was not afraid at all, but shouted out that sentence in an unusually heroic manner. "That's right, that's it, I want to fight 10 of them." Then, Madarome Ikaku, who had drawn his zanpakutō, recited the liberation words without hesitation. "Stretch out, Kishinhara." In an instant, the zanpakutō in Madarome Ikaku's hand was liberated into a weapon similar to a spear. At this moment, Madarome Ikaku, who was holding a spear and ready to go, was obviously ready to fight against the 10 muscular brothers, face the challenge, go in and out 7 times, and fight bloody battles. And Senju Cheng's footsteps also paused, intending to stop and watch the battle. It has been nearly 2 years since Senju Cheng last witnessed Madarome Ikaku fighting. Senju Cheng is undoubtedly curious about Madarome Ikaku's progress. Although the spear of Madarome Ikaku has left a great reputation in the 11th Division, it is obviously not the style of the muscular brothers of the 11th Division to be afraid before the battle. What's more, this is undoubtedly a righteous 10-on-1. Go. Let Madarome-sensei see how powerful we are. That's right, this time we must break Madarome-sensei's spear no matter what. There was no need for any referee to announce the start, and the 10 muscular brothers rushed towards Madarome Ikaku. In an instant, in the chaotic situation, Senju Cheng vaguely saw the spear in Madarome Ikaku's hand standing firm and stabbing left and right, and it can be said that he had no pity for those muscular brothers. In the end, under the gaze of Senju Cheng, Madarome Ikaku became the last winner standing on the field, and the 10 muscular brothers lay on the ground with their wounds covered, wailing and groaning. Ha 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 hiss. Madarame Ikaku was laughing with his hands on his hips, then he took a deep breath and said angrily, "Just now that bastard stabbed me in the waist, it hurt so much." Seeing this, Senju Cheng couldn't bear to watch it anymore, so he couldn't help but release his zanpakutō. In an instant, a grass full of vitality spread out, and the injuries of the muscular brothers lying on the grass and groaning were quickly healed. Madarame Ikaku, who realized it later, looked in the direction of Senju Cheng, and a joyful expression immediately appeared on his face. "Senju." Madarame Ikaku shouted the somewhat unique name, and then ran directly towards Senju Cheng. Obviously, in normal etiquette, calling by the surname directly means alienation, but Madarame Ikaku called Senju from the beginning, and he has always used this name until now. In response, Senju Cheng did not deliberately ask Madarame Ikaku to change the name, but waved his hand to Madarame Ikaku to express his response. "Senju, are you here to see me?" Madarame Ikaku completely ignored the existence of the pink letter and shouted excitedly. This undoubtedly caused the dissatisfaction of Kusaka Yaoru, who punched Madarame Ikaku's chin firmly. Bang! Although she looks like a harmless pink letter, Kusaka Yaoru's strength is unfathomable among the vice-captains. That small punch directly made Madarame Ikaku perform a wave of situ spiral takeoff in front of Senju Cheng. When Madarame Ikaku flew a few meters into the air and fell down, Senju Cheng clearly saw that Madarame Ikaku's chin was broken. This scene with a huge contrast made Senju Cheng subconsciously retreat tactically. Kusaka Yaoru stood up in Senju Cheng's arms and said angrily, "Nonsense, it's obvious that Cheng came here specifically to play with me." Senju Cheng quickly comforted the pink letter, who was a little angry, and then treated Madarame Ikaku. As Yaoru arrived, Kusaka watched many wounded soldiers being healed quickly by Senju's zanpakutō mobility. He suddenly seemed to think of something and said excitedly, "Brother Cheng, can I ask you for a favor?" Facing Yaoru Kusaka's serious request, Senju didn't even think of refusing and asked, "What is it?" "It's just that Seireitei hasn't been able to fight to his heart's content. It's so uncomfortable. Can Cheng satisfy Seireitei?" Senju. Not to mention whether Senju now has the ability to fight with Kinpachi's Araki, even if Senju really has this level of strength. Instead of fighting with Kinpachi's Araki, the muscular beast, Senju might as well go back and fight with Unohana teacher. Then, Senju's face showed that he seemed to want to completely satisfy Yaoru Kusaka, but he seemed to be reluctant to speak because of some reality. "That, Yaoru, I'm just a doctor. I'm afraid I can't satisfy Captain Zaraki in terms of compatibility." Kusaka Yaoru was slightly stunned, then reacted, waved his hand, and said, No, Cheng, I mean that Cheng is responsible for maintaining the treatment ability outside the field, so that Seireitei can fight with the team members to his heart's content. Senju Cheng heard this, and his heart moved slightly. If this is the case, Senju Cheng is completely happy to satisfy Kusaka Yaoru. After all, Senju Cheng can use this to judge the spiritual pressure of each member of the 11th Division very clearly, and can take the opportunity to integrate the forest seed into the bodies of those Shinigami who have reached the level of chief officers. You must know that as a combat division, although the death rate of the 11th Division is notoriously high, the overall spiritual pressure and compatibility of the corresponding team members are second to none in the entire GOTY 13 Division. This is a completely self-interested thing, and Senju Cheng has no reason to refuse the cute Kusaka Yaoru in front of him. Even if Kusaka Yaoru personally went to the battlefield to fight against Kinpachi's Araki, it is possible that an important seed would be left in Kusaka Yaoru's body. Of course, although Senju Cheng was very willing, he still showed a somewhat embarrassed expression on the surface, until Kusaka Yaoru's expression was obviously a little disappointed. Senju Cheng rubbed Kusaka Yaoru's head and said, "There is really no way. Since this is Yaoru's request, it seems that there is no other choice but to agree." In an instant, Kusaka Yaoru's eyes were obviously shining again, and he jumped directly into Senju Cheng's arms again, hugged Senju Cheng and said happily, "Cheng, you are really the best. Yaoru likes you." Senju Cheng heard this, and he couldn't help but have some associations in his heart. If it wasn't this lily version of Yaoru who said a word, but another Yaoru who said it, how nice it would be. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 240 Who is more efficient in healing or fighting? Apart from the slight guilt of fooling around and gaining the favor of the pink little lily, Senju Cheng's agreement undoubtedly made Kusaka Yaoru very excited. Soon, under Kusaka Yaoru's order, except for a small number of 11th Division Shinigami such as Asuka or young Cheng-ge who led the team to go out on a mission, almost all the members of the 11th Division gathered in the largest training ground. After confirming the situation, Kinpachi Zaraka couldn't help but show a bit of excitement on his face. Fighting, that's right. Although these team members are relatively too weak, being able to chop and be chopped at all will undoubtedly satisfy him a little. This is also one of the reasons why Kinpachi Zaraka has been trying to recruit Senju Cheng into the team before. Then, Kinpachi Zaraka grinned at Senju Cheng standing on the sidelines from a distance, revealing his somewhat scary teeth, and said wildly, "Little ghost, you have to treat them well. If you accidentally kill all the team members, I will be in trouble." Of course, Captain Zaraka can rest assured about this. As long as they don't die on the spot, I can save their lives. However, Captain Zaraka, please don't forget to settle the corresponding treatment costs with the 4th Division afterwards. Senju Cheng pushed his glasses, and his gentle tone revealed absolute confidence. Madarumi Ikaku grew rapidly in less than 2 years after joining the GOTY 13th Division, and then completely established his position as the 3rd seat of the 11th Division, but Senju Cheng has never stood still or stagnated. Not to mention that Senju Cheng has gone all out in combat ability, and has reached a level that is difficult to deal with even ordinary captains recognized by Unohana Retsu. Perhaps in terms of Ghost Way, White Fighting and Kendo, Senju Cheng still has great shortcomings due to time issues. But in the Kido and medical skills that Senju Cheng is most focused on, Senju Cheng's current level is no less than that of Yamada Senjuak. In terms of the structure, composition, and quality of spirits, Makoto Senju has almost surpassed Unohana Retsu. As Makoto Senju's understanding of spirits grows rapidly, when he uses the healing ability of zanpakutō, Senju, his healing speed for spirit damage has reached the level of high-speed regeneration of hollows. In other words, as long as they are not captain-level Shinigami spirits, ordinary Shinigami spirits, as long as they are not directly killed, as long as they have a breath left, Makoto Senju can heal them back. As long as I am still standing here, I will not allow lives that have passed away in pain to exist within my sight. As Makoto Senju's voice fell, a burst of grass full of vitality completely covered the entire training ground. Witnessing Makoto Senju's handsome scene, although Kusaka Yaoru may not understand what handsome is, Kusaka Yaoru, who has always cheered for Kinpachi Zaraka, couldn't help but exclaimed, "Brother Makoto. Great." After receiving the assurance from Senju Makoto, Kinpachi Zaraka looked at the densely packed 11th Division members around him, and his eyes gradually revealed the urge to chop down. Kinpachi Zaraka pulled the collar of his Shinigami uniform hard, revealing his rock-like muscles, and shouted wildly and heroically at the hundreds of 11th Division members present. "Come on, fight! Kids, let's have some fun. You can come and besiege me together, or take turns to chop each other's chests. Come on." The violent spiritual pressure, as Kinpachi Zaraka's emotions fluctuated, also seemed to be out of control and exploded with Kinpachi Zaraka as the center. For a moment, even those members of the 11th Division who usually felt the pressure of Kinpachi Zaraka's spiritual pressure suddenly felt a sense of difficulty breathing. However, all the Shinigami who voluntarily joined the 11th Division were battle maniacs, becoming stronger in the fight, continuing to fight after becoming stronger, and fighting until death. This is the main theme of the 11th Division. And the wild invitation from the captain also completely ignited the hearts of the Shinigami of the 11th Division. Dying or something, it doesn't matter at all. Perhaps it is really satisfying to be hacked to death by a strong man of the captain's level. Suddenly, led by Madarumi Ikaku, many Shinigami of the 11th Division almost rushed up and swung their swords at Kinpachi Zaraka. The next moment, countless blood splashed up, and the broken limbs were even more shocking. Kinpachi Zaraka, who really entered the fighting state, might hold back, but he would definitely slash at all opponents in front of him mercilessly, enjoying the pleasure of fighting each other. This was destined to be a one-sided, overwhelming battle, although Kinpachi Zaraka had to face most of the members of the entire 11th Division, before Kinpachi Zaraka's spiritual pressure was consumed to a certain extent. The huge difference in spiritual pressure alone was enough to make it impossible for the members of the 11th Division who fought with Kinpachi Zaraka in the early and middle stages to break through Kinpachi Zaraka's defense. On the contrary, every time King Puchizaraki swung his sword, even if 4 or 5 Shinigami raised their swords to block at the same time, most of them were blown away to a terrible extent. However, despite this, the members of the 11th Division still did not retreat at all, but instead continued to enjoy this unequal fight, enjoying a blow from King Puchizaraki at the cost of the possibility of real death. Mabarame, who was charging at the front, was the first to be forced to temporarily withdraw from the battlefield by King Puchizaraki's brutal, bloody, passionate, selfless. In this one-sided massacre, the green light that kept on shining was maintaining the lives of the members of the 11th Division and quickly repairing their injuries. Spirit control. For a while, in order to ensure the large amount of spirits needed to repair the spirit body, Senju Cheng had to expand the range of spirit absorption, constantly extracting the spirits around to frantically repair various injuries. And as Senju Cheng's naked eyes gradually couldn't keep up with the efficiency of repairing the injuries of King Puchizaraki's chopping, he could only close his eyes slightly, completely relying on the green grass that stretched out to explore and confirm various injuries, and quickly repair the spirit body. Unconsciously, Senju Cheng was wrapped in the ball of green light, and his body was slightly off the ground. The countless green grasses that spread out under Senju Cheng's feet seemed to have life and constantly repaired the injuries of many 11th Division Shinigami. As Senju Cheng's healing efficiency continued to increase, and even Madarame Ikaku directly joined the second round of battle again, King Puchizaraki seemed to be excited, and the pace of fighting further accelerated. For a moment, King Puchizaraki and Senju Cheng seemed to be engaged in an invisible competition. Who has a higher healing or fighting efficiency? Chapter 241 Fighting and Treatment. As King Puchizaraki became more and more powerful, his spiritual pressure also surged and increased unconsciously. The huge golden spiritual pressure was filled with the breath of brutal fighting and vented wildly with King Puchizaraki as the center. The serrated zanpakutō held by King Puchizaraki also turned into the sharp teeth and claws of a beast, constantly chopping down one after another who dared to stand in front of King Puchizaraki. The friction between the sharp blade and flesh, the collision between the blade and bones. At this moment, King Puchizaraki felt the long-lost pleasure of fighting since joining the 13th Division of the Gotti. Although they were not equal enemies, this kind of fighting that almost did not need to worry about all the superfluous things also allowed King Puchizaraki, the beast, to fully release his instincts. Aha, come on, chop me down, keep going. In the wild laughter of King Puchizaraki, the members of the 11th Division also rushed towards King Puchizaraki one after another. Perhaps, King Puchizaraki's strength almost made the members of the 11th Division seem to see an insurmountable natural chasm. However, the essence of the 11th Division is fighting, a fighting that has been passed down from the first captain to the present day. And fighting never deliberately selects opponents. Especially being able to fight against an enemy that far surpasses oneself, that undoubtedly makes the members of the 11th Division very excited. Is this the strength of Captain Zaraki? Facing this strength. Respect this strength. And then challenge this strength. For a moment, in the eyes of Kusaka Yaoru, it seemed as if he saw one instinct after another being released, and they were colliding wildly. It's great that Ken's instinct is being released. Kusaka Yaoru's pure eyes flashed with excitement and joy, and he murmured, "Thank you so much, Makoto. This way, Ken will be further satisfied and can completely regain his instincts." Makoto, when can you release your huge instincts? I'm really looking forward to it. Makoto, Yaorai likes you the most, especially for the instincts hidden in your body. Makoto, you really have no resistance at all. Release them and play with Yaorai. However, at this moment, Makoto Senju obviously did not have the extra energy to pay attention to Kusaka Yaorai, but focused all his attention on manipulating zanpakutō. Senju to maintain range treatment. As King Puchizaraki completely entered the fighting state, Makoto Senju maintained the treatment of more than 100 people at almost every moment. The green light that kept lighting up in various places in the training ground almost dyed King Puchizaraki, who was covered in blood, green. This scene also amazed the other Shinigami who came to check because of the movement of the 11th Division. As the captain of the 11th Division with the name King Puchi, it is not incredible that King Puchizaraki can still kill indiscriminately in the face of the siege of the entire 11th Division. However, Makoto Senju's ability to quickly heal the wounded on a large scale is quite amazing. Even though, with Makoto Senju taking office as the vice captain of the 4th Division, the improvement of his status has also made more and more Shinigami pay attention to Makoto Senju's zanpakutō ability. However, no Shinigami could have expected that Makoto Senju's zanpakutō ability would be so powerful on the healing side that it could cover hundreds of seriously injured wounded at the same time for treatment. So far, almost the entire 11th Division has been chopped by Kinpachi's Araki, but no Shinigami has died so far. Even if Kinpachi's Araki held back a little and did not cut the Shinigami of the 11th Division in two, it is enough to show how powerful Makoto Senju's wartime healing ability is. What an amazing ability! Komamura Sejin, who was taller and more muscular than Kinpachi's Araki, but whose head was completely covered by an iron mask and who was wearing the aori of the captain of the 7th Division, commented in a low and serious voice. The vice-captain of the 4th Division, Makoto Senju, is enough to be comparable to the role that 10 rescue squads can play at the same time. This statement was undoubtedly one of the highest evaluations for a doctor in the eyes of the captain of the 7th Division, Komamura Sejin. After all, the rescue squad is the battlefield medical support force composed of the real elite doctors in the 4th Division, and now the entire 4th Division does not have enough manpower to maintain 10 standard rescue squads. In other words, in the eyes of Komamura Sejin, the treatment effect that Makoto Senju can provide on the battlefield is enough to be comparable to the entire 4th Division. As another new captain and Komamura Sejin's friend, the captain of the 9th Division, Kaname crossed his hands in front of his chest and said calmly, "Zojin, Senju Makoto is just a vice-captain. This evaluation is obviously overestimating him, not to mention that there is Captain Unohana in the 4th Division." No, at this moment, a figure stopped beside Tosen Kaname. It was Kakushansui, who was holding his hat with one hand and wearing a pink aori. Unohana Senpei's treatment level is naturally the best in Soul Society, but when it comes to wartime treatment efficiency, Vice-Captain Senju is indeed the best in Soul Society at present. After a pause, Kakushansui's eyes, which seemed to be full of vicissitudes and debauchery, stared in the direction of Senju Makoto and said, "Even if Captain Unohana's shy guy, Nishijuku, is also unable to heal more than one wounded, Vice-Captain Senju's zanpakutō may be called the strongest healing zanpakutō in Soul Society. The strongest healing zanpakutō." As the veteran captain, Kakushansui, made this comment, Tosen Kaname's face subconsciously revealed a hint of displeasure. Perhaps this comment does not mean anything, but it is undoubtedly enough to directly raise Senju Makoto's reputation in the Seireitei to a higher level. And Tosen Kaname's subtle expression was also accurately captured by Kakushansui, but what made Kakushansui a little confused was that, as far as Kakushansui knew, there should be no contradiction between Tosen Kaname and Senju Makoto. Strange, is it simply a matter of dislike and personality conflict, or is there some secret? As the captain of the intelligence division and also the most important surveillance eye placed by Yamamoto Shinraisai Shichikuni in the Gotti 13, Kakushansui instinctively raised a hint of suspicion and concern. Especially after experiencing the hollowification incident, both Yamamoto Shinraisai Shichikuni and Kakushansui were obviously still quite wary and vigilant of the new captains. However, Komamura Sejin nodded obviously and spoke in a serious and rigid voice. "I agree with what Captain Kaku said. Vice-Captain Senju is gentle in his daily actions. He is a qualified and excellent doctor." Chapter 242, Soul Society's Strongest Healing zanpakutō. While the captains were talking, the battle on the training ground became more and more tragic. Almost all the Shinigami of the 11th Division had been treated by Makoto Senju and joined the second round of battle. Among them, the most excited Madarome Ikaku started the fourth round of battle. The 3 serious injuries did not affect Madarome Ikaku at all. Instead, after each recovery, Madarome Ikaku gave a thumbs up in the direction of Makoto Senju and rushed towards Kinpachi's Araki again. There is no doubt that if the souls of the powerful Shinigami in this world will go to hell after death, then Madarome Ikaku has definitely jumped back and forth between hell and the Soul Society several times. I'm afraid, the gate of hell is about to be confused. What is flashing back and forth in front of it? Blood has almost stained every gap in the entire training ground, and Kinpachi's Araki is like a demon beast bathed in countless blood. However, Kinpachi's Araki still had no intention of giving up, and the spiritual pressure on Kinpachi's Araki seemed to be getting more unstable and terrifying. This made Shansui Kaku, who witnessed all the details, flash his eyes slightly and realize something. The Gotti 13 has an uncontrollable first-generation Kinpachi, which is already troublesome enough, and we can't have another uncontrollable and terrifying beast at the same time. The next moment, Shansui Kaku's figure flashed in front of Kinpachi's Araki, and reminded him in a frivolous and casual tone. "That's enough, Captain Zaraki. If this goes on, even if their bodies can be healed by Vice Captain Senju, they will suffer terrible pressure mentally. Kinpachi Zaraki's head, which was constantly dripping with blood, slightly tilted his eyes downward, as if he was despising Shunsui and as if he was provoking a beast, and said, "As long as the enemy is still standing in front of you, why shouldn't the sword continue to chop?" Shunsui said. "But these are all your subordinates, not enemies." This sentence also made Kinpachi Zaraki startled, and then he looked at the members of the 11th Division around him. In response to Kinpachi Zaraki, it was the eyes full of admiration and awe. That was the complete admiration for Kinpachi Zaraki, and it was also that complete recognition of Kinpachi by the members of the 11th Division. "They are not enemies." Kinpachi Zaraki chewed on this sentence, then pulled out an inexplicable smile, put his zanpakutō back on his shoulder, and said, "That's it for today. If you guys can't give me more satisfaction next time, I will cut them all off without mercy." "Yes, Captain Zaraki." A tired and excited voice echoed in the 11th Division almost in unison. As Kinpachi Zaraki stopped, Makoto Senju quickly completed the treatment of the subsequent wounded, which also made Makoto Senju gain a lot of respectful eyes from the Shinigami of the 11th Division. Perhaps, the members of the 11th Division are obsessed with fighting and have no fear of death, but that does not mean that they really do not want to live. This also makes Senju Makoto's exaggerated healing ability unanimously welcomed and praised by the entire 11th Division. Until the end, when Senju Makoto left the 11th Division, he was almost sent off by hundreds of muscle brothers covered with blood scabs for hundreds of meters. And this time, the bloody and exaggerated sparring training of the 11th Division also caused a lot of discussion in the entire Jingling Court. The name of Kinpachi Zaraki as a beast has thoroughly penetrated into the hearts of every Shinigami in the Jingling Court. In contrast, Senju Makoto maintained the lives of the Shinigami of the entire 11th Division, and in the end, he actually relied on his own strength to ensure that no Shinigami died. The amazing group healing ability also made the name of Senju Makoto, the vice captain of the 4th Division, truly resound throughout the Jingling Court for the first time. It was not because of the name of Unohana Retsu's disciple, nor because of the incident with Byakuya Kuchika, nor because of the kidnapping of the zanpakutō betrayal incident. This time, it was purely because of the ability represented by the name Senju Makoto that made the entire Shinigami of the Seireitei remember him. Moreover, no one knows where the saying came from, but gradually a considerable number of Shinigami began to believe that the zanpakutō Synchromansum in the hands of Senju Makoto is the strongest healing zanpakutō in Soul Society. There is no doubt that with Senju Makoto's cautious character, he would never give himself such a title, and even Senju Makoto tried to secretly prevent the spread of this saying. However, under the praise of some crazy fans, especially those noble ladies who are usually bored, the word of mouth. The gaudy 13th Division has not yet admitted it, but the evaluation of Senju Makoto among the nobles has gradually become unified. Senju Makoto is the holder of the strongest healing zanpakutō Synchromansum in Soul Society. This also led to a sudden increase in the proportion of nobles who originally went to the 4th Division for treatment, making the 4th Division even busier. However, in contrast, the 4th Division's internal funds became richer than ever before due to the generosity of the nobles, which made Yokiriza, who was gradually responsible for the financial management of the 4th Division, smile every day. However, when Yamachika Ishikawa returned from leading the team to conquer a group that appeared and wandered in the remote areas of Soul Society, his face was ashen. Especially after Yamachika Ishikawa received the treatment bill from the 4th Division, his whole body was shaking, and his fingers were trembling as he counted the note on the bill back and forth. The next moment, Yamachika Ishikawa felt his eyes go black, and he almost died, and then he angrily broke into the captain's room of the 11th Division, slapped the treatment bill in his hand in front of Kinpachi Zaraki, and asked, "Captain, isn't everything on that bill true?" "What?" Kinpachi Zaraki asked after glancing at him. "It's about the invitation of Makoto Senju to provide medical care for the entire squad not long ago." Yamachika Ishikawa asked with slightly red eyes. "Ah? That's the truth." At this point, Kinpachi Zaraki smacked his lips and turned to Yairu Kusaka, who was sitting on the tatami and playing by himself. "Yairu, when are you going to call the kid Makoto Senju over again? It's really exciting to chop with that kid constantly healing." Yairu Kusaka's eyes lit up when he heard that, and he raised his hand without hesitation to respond. "No problem, Kinpachi, I'll go find Makoto right away." The next moment, a wailing sound rang out. Yamachika Ishikawa hugged Kinpachi Zaraki's thighs and cried, Captain, the medical bill totals 1,300 treatment expenses for seriously injured soldiers, and the team's funds are about to go bankrupt. Chapter 243. Over 100 million in medical expenses. In addition to the independent salary of each Shinigami in the entire GOTY 13 division, each division also has its own fixed internal funds. Generally, the divisions obtain corresponding additional internal funds by completing the tasks of the 1st Division or the Central 46th Office. In contrast, each division also has various expenditures in various aspects, similar to the treatment of other divisions in the 4th Division. Treatment fees are also required. Therefore, after agreeing to Kusaka Yarai, Senju Makoto also confirmed with Kinpachi Zaraki that the treatment fees needed to be settled. Kinpachi Zaraki, who had no concept of money, naturally agreed subconsciously, and then turned on the beast mode to his heart's content. It must be said that after such a round of fighting, Kinpachi Zaraki had a good time, and the members of the 11th Division were also happy to be chopped, and Makoto Senju sewing so much that he was completely left with nothing. However, you have to know that every member of the 11th Division who was chopped by Kinpachi Zaraki was at least seriously injured, and many members were almost chopped for 2 rounds. In this way, when Okiriza actively checked the treatment status of each member of the 11th Division, the calculated treatment cost undoubtedly reached an astonishing figure. 1,300 times, enough for the entire 11th Division to be completely wiped out twice and rescued. This made the 11th Division, which was originally not rich in funds, completely declared finished. In the end, under the hoarse narration of Isuko Yamachika, Zaraki Kinpachi and Kusaka Yaru realized the seriousness of the problem. So it will be even more difficult to get the kid Senju Makoto to come for treatment next time. I can't secretly use the team funds to buy Konpito in the future. Listening to the answers of Zaraki Kinpachi and Kusaka Yaru, Isuko Yamachika's last bit of strength was completely defeated. These two guys didn't realize the seriousness of the matter at all. The bankruptcy of the team funds means that I want to embezzle the team funds for beauty and hairdressing. No, all expenses in the team will be completely reduced, and even eating will be impossible. For a while, Isuko Yamachika, who was in charge of the 11th Division's affairs and internal funds, was so worried that his hair lost its luster. No. Finally, after hesitating for several days, Isuko Yamachika stood up in front of Madarome Ikaku, holding the medical bill and said, "If this goes on, the internal funds of the 11th Division will definitely be ruined. We must discuss it with Senju." "What is there to discuss?" Madarome Ikaku said disapprovingly, plucking his ears. "It's just a little money, and Senju also needs to take care of the entire 4th Division. You can't just exempt us, right? A little money." Isuko Yamachika slapped the medical bill on Madarome Ikaku's bald head, and then pulled his collar and roared, "It's obviously a few $100 million, bastard." Then, Isuko Yamachika, who was panting, spoke. "Anyway, if Senju doesn't reduce some of my medical expenses, I will stay in the 4th Division and won't leave." Madarome Ikaku said with wide eyes in disbelief. "What? You want to join the 4th Division? Get lost." Isuko Yamachika, who was in a bad mood, grabbed the medical bill and decided not to pay attention to the idiot Madarome Ikaku. Instead, he hurriedly ran towards the 4th Division. However, before Isuko Yamachika could find Senju Makoto's office, Okiriza, who looked like a girl next door, stood in front of Isuko Yamachika and said, "Isuko-say, the medical expenses are not settled here." Isuko Yamachika's mouth twitched slightly, and then he pulled out a somewhat forced smile and answered, "Riza, this is not a fancy way to ask. I'm here to discuss something with Makoto this time." "Where is Makoto?" Okiriza said with her eyes wide open. Isuko-say didn't have any cunning ideas and planned to ask Makoto for mercy and reduce the medical expenses through some kind of equivalent exchange. Isuko Yamachika, whose inner thoughts were exposed at once, froze and showed an awkward but polite smile. Immediately, Okiriza put her hands on her hips and said without giving in, "Isuko, the 5th seed, please don't bother Makoto-kun. Now I am responsible for the expenses of the 4th Division. The treatment bills have been verified and signed by your team members one by one. Even if it is reported to the 1st Division or the Central 46th Office, the treatment fee cannot be reduced." Isuko Yamachika was completely furious and argued, "But isn't this number too high? It is obviously only Makoto-kun who is treating, and no treatment equipment is consumed at all. Even the treatment venue is in the 11th Division, but the treatment fee is over 100 million. Is it high?" How is it high? Not to mention that the one who treated the most outstanding and perfect vice-captain of our 4th division, Riza's beautiful eyes widened and questioned. Besides, the number of times the seriously injured were treated was as many as 1,300 times, and the average cost of treating the seriously injured each time was less than 100,000, which is about 10 times lower than the normal price. Are you still not satisfied? Suddenly, Ayase Yamachaika was speechless. Normally, the 4th division would charge less than 100,000 for treating a seriously injured soldier, which was a bargain price. However, Ayase Yamachaika never expected that he had only been away from the 11th Division for a few days, and the entire 11th Division had died twice and been resuscitated. This was a terrifying treatment cost that the 11th Division's internal funds could not afford. At this time, Senju Cheng appeared at the corner with his hands in his pockets, and while walking, he gently told Kotetsuya, who was following behind him, about a treatment plan for a certain disease. Yongin, I understand what you mean, but as a doctor, we can't just consider the effectiveness of the treatment. We also need to consider the patient's financial situation. That patient is just a low-level noble. All the treatment costs are borne by himself. Choosing the treatment plan you mentioned will undoubtedly cause great pressure on the treatment costs. And the treatment plan I chose may be slightly less effective, but it will undoubtedly greatly reduce the financial burden. This is also an aspect that a qualified doctor needs to consider. Do you understand? Kotetsu Yongin's eyes lit up slightly, and he nodded repeatedly while taking notes in a small notebook. Yes, I understand, Vice Captain Senju. That's good, Senju Cheng smiled and encouraged, and then turned his head and seemed to notice the presence of Ayase Yamachaika, and immediately said with a smile. Yamachaika, why didn't you tell me that you were here? Are you feeling unwell? Chapter 244 Wrong Treatment Bill. At this moment, looking at Senju Cheng in front of him, Ayase Yamachaika's eyes could not hide his excitement. Kang, it turned out that my previous suspicion that Makoto was treating the 11th Division like leaks was definitely the biggest misunderstanding of Makoto. Makoto is undoubtedly a truly kind and honest doctor with medical ethics. He would even consider the economic situation of a lower-level noble so considerately. No matter how you think about it, Makoto is definitely not eyeing the treatment funds of the 11th Division. Makoto, Ayase Yamachaika, who has always been extremely narcissistic and conceited, and who is somewhat rude to men, is unusually kind to Senju Makoto. Even the way he addresses him has changed invisibly, and then he directly holds Senju Makoto's palm and shakes it vigorously. Senju Makoto's face reveals a bit of just the right amount of doubt, and with his other hand he gently pats Ayase Yamachaika, comforting him with concern. Yamachaika, where exactly do you feel uncomfortable? Don't be anxious, tell me slowly, I will do my best to treat you. I'm not feeling uncomfortable, but there is one thing I have been asking for my whole life, please help me, Makoto-kun. Ayase Yamachaika said excitedly and a little ashamed. Yamachaika, given our relationship, please just speak up. Senju Makoto responded straightforwardly and frankly. Senju Makoto's reaction also made Ayase Yamachaika more moved, and he felt ashamed in his heart. Makoto-kun regarded him as a friend, and he had wanted to go against Makoto-kun's wishes to find out the secret of his zanpakutō many times in the past, and he also wanted to make such an ignorant request. At this moment, under Senju Makoto's sincere and gentle eyes, Ayase Yamachaika even had the idea of retreating. However, when he thought of the responsibility on his shoulders, he had to bite the bullet and continue to stand in front of Senju Makoto. There is no doubt that the internal funds of the 11th Division could not afford the treatment costs of over 100 million. Perhaps, idiots like Kinpachi Zaraki, Yaorai Kusaka, and Ayakaku Madaroma did not realize the seriousness of the matter, but the collapse of the team's funds will inevitably cause the entire 11th Division to almost fall to the brink of collapse. Makoto-kun, the medical bills of the 11th Division, there are some problems, Ayase Yamachaika said shamefully. This made Senju Makoto frown immediately, and he turned to look at Riza and said seriously. Riza, what's the matter? Didn't I ask you to strictly verify the relevant medical expenses? It's better to underestimate or miss the calculation, but you must never charge your colleagues in the 11th Division a little more for medical expenses. Makoto-kun, However, before Riza could speak, Senju Makoto raised his hand to interrupt Riza and said, I don't need an explanation, Riza, you go and repeat the calculation for me immediately and give me a result as soon as possible, understand? As these words rang out, Riza couldn't help puffing up her cheeks and looked at Ayasuke Yamachaika viciously, as if she had completely blamed Ayasuke Yamachaika for the fault of her own scolding. Seeing this, Senju Cheng frowned in front of Ayasuke Yamachaika and said, "Riza, what's that look in your eyes? Did Yamachaika wrong you? Apologize to Yamachaika immediately, and then make up for the mistake you made." Hearing this, Ayasuke Yamachaika saw that Riza was about to bow and apologize slowly with a murderous look, and his whole face couldn't help but turn red. He waved his hands in shame and exclaimed, "Makoto, you misunderstood. There is nothing wrong with the treatment bill. It has nothing to do with Riza." "Ah?" Senju Makoto seemed stunned, and then asked. "Then the treatment bill that Yamachaika said has a problem is, it's the team's funds, it's a bit difficult to operate, so can the treatment bill?" Senju Makoto's expression suddenly looked a little more surprised. Before Ayasuke Yamachaika, who was already a little thin-skinned, finished speaking, Riza, who was full of anger, spoke before Senju Makoto. "You shameless fellow, you're obviously trying to embarrass Makoto-kun. Besides, this is a medical bill issued in the name of the 4th Division. Even if Makoto-kun proposes to modify it, he will definitely be reprimanded by Captain Unohana." Okay, Riza," Makoto Senju repeatedly comforted Riza-oki, who seemed to be protecting her food, and then said with a gentle and embarrassed look on his face, "Yamachaika, I'm sorry, the medical bill was counted by Riza, and I haven't had time to check the specific medical expenses. It's just that the 4th Division also has an independent medical fee standard." After a pause, Makoto Senju seemed to have thought of something and said, "How about this, is it over part? I will pay it first, how about it?" However, Ayasuke Yamachaika was very moved by Makoto Senju's personal investment, but he also understood that with Makoto Senju's income, it would be impossible for him to pay the tens of millions of overspending medical expenses. "Mr. Makoto, thank you for your kindness, but the treatment fee is quite high, rather high." Upon hearing this, Makoto Senju's eyes fell on the stack of treatment bills in Yamachaika Ayasuke's hand, and he reached out to take it. The next moment, Makoto Senju's face showed obvious surprise, and he exclaimed, 134,690,000. Then, Makoto Senju quickly flipped through the corresponding list, which was signed by the members of the 11th Division one after another. Finally, Makoto Senju seemed to check the final amount again. This, for a moment, Makoto Senju's expression completely revealed a feeling of wanting to help Yamachaika Ayasuke but feeling helpless. "Yamachaika," Makoto Senju sighed and said, "there is no problem with the bill," and Riza also calculated the minimum treatment fee for seriously injured people according to the treatment fee standard of the 4th Division. After a pause, Makoto Senju said with some guilt, "It was my negligence that I forgot about the huge number of treatments, which led to this wrong treatment bill." "No, Makoto-kun, you were just following the rules and standards of the 4th Division." Without waiting for Ayasuke Yamachaika to finish, Senju Makoto slapped the stack of treatment bills in his hand and said, "Yamachaika, this treatment bill is too huge. I'm afraid it has already been reported to Unohana teacher. I personally do not have the power to revoke it." Hearing this, Ayasuke Yamachaika's expression dimmed, and he also understood that his request undoubtedly caused great embarrassment and trouble to Senju Makoto. However, Senju Makoto's face showed a resolute expression, and then he said, "Yamachaika, wait for me for a moment, I will go to Unohana teacher in person to ask, no matter what, Unohana teacher must revoke this wrong treatment bill." Chapter 245. Charity Medical Loan. However, just when Ayasuke Yamachaika showed an expression of excitement and guilt, Riza directly blocked Senju Makoto and said, "Makoto, no, you'll definitely be scolded or even punished by Captain Unohana. Yes, Vice Captain Senju, this is a treatment fee of hundreds of millions, no matter how you think about it." Kotetsuin also reminded Senju Makoto weakly. "No matter what, we must try it, even if it is a partial reduction," Senju Makoto said firmly. Riza had no intention of giving in, but said more anxiously, "Makoto, have you forgotten? Captain Unohana severely scolded you a few days ago for conducting such large-scale treatment without permission in the 11th Division. If you mention this matter again now, Captain Unohana will definitely be even more angry." That's right, Vice Captain Senju was kicked out of Captain Unohana's living room covered in blood at the time," Kotetsuin also continued to remind. It's okay, I'm Unohana's disciple after all. For a moment, during the back and forth conversation between Senju Makutō, Ioki Riza, and Kotetsuya, Ayasuke Yamachika felt extremely guilty. He was absolutely too mean. He actually made such a mean request, and let Makutō risk his life to fight for a reduction in the medical bill for him. However, Ayasuke Yamachika's feelings and sense of responsibility for the 11th Division forced him to place his only hope on Senju Makutō. Just when Ayasuke Yamachika felt tortured, Ioki Riza suddenly spoke. By the way, Makutō, if you really want to help the 11th Division, why not let the 11th Division pay in installments according to the medical loan method you proposed before? Ayasuke Yamachika noticed a certain word and asked quickly. Medical loan. Ioki Riza glared at Ayasuke Yamachika with dissatisfaction, but still explained. Yes, this is an idea that Makutō originally proposed to sympathize with the lower nobles who were in extremely poor economic conditions. The principle is no matter what, treat the disease first, and then talk about the treatment costs later. Then, Ioki Riza specifically explained the operation method of the so-called medical loan. Since the nobles are recognized as nobles because they already have their own territories in the Seireitei, therefore, the nobles can pledge their territories and promise to slowly repay part of the treatment costs in monthly installments over the next 10, 20 or 30 years. Of course, in order to make up for the loss of a large amount of treatment costs in the short term, the repayment of treatment costs needs to be supplemented with a little extra interest, that is, an annual interest rate of 5.65%. Hearing this, Ayasuke Yamachika's eyes lit up. Although Ayasuke Yamachika's math is not very good, the simplest multiplication is still very clear. The 4th Division is willing to delay that gradual collection of treatment costs for such a long time, and only charge an interest of 5.65%. This is simply charity. Then, Ioki Riza briefly gave a recent example. A lower-class noble owed 300,000 inches medical expenses after multiple treatments. In the end, the lower-class noble only needed to pay back more than 1,000 inches medical expenses every month through the medical loan. This made Ayasuke Yamachika's expression completely excited. 300,000. Only need to pay more than 1,000 every month. Mr. Makutō, I want to apply for this medical loan for the 11th Division. Ayasuke Yamachika said without hesitation. Ah? Senju Makutō said with some embarrassment. Yamachika, this medical loan has just been implemented. There may be some loopholes that need to be repeatedly verified to be repaired, otherwise, no. Ayasuke Yamachika, who was already extremely guilty of Senju Makutō, said firmly. Instead of bothering Makutō to ask Captain Unohana, it is better to slowly repay the medical bills of the 11th Division through this method. After a pause, Ayasuke Yamachika said to Ioki Riza. Riza, please help me calculate how much the 11th Squadron needs to pay back every month if they apply for a medical loan. Ioki Riza introduced skillfully. This is also divided into different terms. Currently, it is generally divided into 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years and 100 years. Which term does Ayasuke-sensei plan to settle the medical bill? Ayasuke Yamachika pondered for a moment. For the relatively long lifespan of the Shinigami, 100 years is not too long. But in the end, Ayasuke Yamachika still tried to ask. If it's 30 years, how much is it per month? Wait a minute. Then, Ioki Riza took out a pen and a small notebook from her bosom, and seemed to calculate for a full moment as if writing furiously, and then raised her head and said. Not much, less than 800,000, only 777,478.89 per month. More than 700,000. Ayasuke Yamachika's eyes were almost visibly happy. For a Shinigami, more than 700,000 per month is undoubtedly still an astronomical figure. However, this figure is not unacceptable for the activity funds of the entire 11th Division. Even if there is also a lot of pressure, it is definitely affordable. At least, compared to the one-time treatment fee of over 100 million, more than 700,000 a month can only be regarded as a small matter. Then, Ayasuke Yamachika immediately expressed his intention to apply for this commercial loan, and quickly signed that contract on behalf of the 11th Division and Ioki Riza. As for the collateral of the 11th Division, it is naturally the spacious team house and land of the 11th Division. In this regard, Ayasuke Yamachika has no worries at all. It is not a problem for the huge 11th Division to settle more than 700,000 a month from the team funds. Mr. Makutō, thank you so much this time. Thanks to your medical loan, otherwise the team funds of the 11th Division will really collapse from my hands. Isuko Cheng-ge held Senju Makoto's palm and expressed his heartfelt gratitude. Feeling guilty, Senju Makoto was afraid to look directly into Isuko Cheng-ge's eyes. A loan of 134.69 million, with an annual interest rate of 5.65%. In the end, the interest that the 11th Division had to settle, excluding the principal, was already more than 145 million. I really deserve to die. Senju Makoto silently condemned himself. However, in order for Unohana-sensei to enjoy the most beautiful flowers all year round, and in order to rapidly flourish under the sufficient funds of the 4th Division, let the 11th Division suffer a little. Anyway, Unohana-sensei must be raised in wealth, and those muscular brothers lack the pressure of poverty at first glance. Chapter 246. Sincerity and Great Love. In fact, when Senju Makoto first proposed this medical loan, in addition to the fact that there was some kindness in it from a doctor, so that some nobles and Shinigami with financial difficulties could receive normal treatment, the second purpose was to harvest a little wealth from the noble class of the Seireitei, so as to further increase the funds of the 4th Division, so that the 4th Division could better protect the Seireitei and serve the entire Soul Society. As for not paying it back, Senju Makoto had no such worries at all. Not to mention the friendship between Senju Makoto and the Shifen Yuan family and the Kachika family, even the existence of Unohana-retsu was enough for those nobles to think carefully. As for the medical bill of the 11th Division, it was completely beyond Senju Makoto's expectations, but it also made Senju Makoto think a little. The 11th Division, that is undoubtedly too vital. And Senju Makoto also knew that the 11th Division's internal funds could not afford the medical expenses of over 100 million at once, and in the end it was likely that Kinpachi Zaraki and Yamachika Isuko would cheat. Therefore, the appearance of Isuko Yamachika was completely expected by Senju Makoto, and Senju Makoto also asked Ulu Takuya to remind him when Isuko Yamachika arrived at the 4th Division. After that, Senju Makoto did not need to communicate with Okiriza and Kotetsu in advance. He only needed to follow that trend to let Isuko Yamachika embark on this only path. In this way, in addition to the huge supplement to the team funds of the 4th Division in the next 30 years, Senju Makoto can also avoid being invited to conduct large-scale treatment in the next 30 years. The last treatment bill has not been settled yet, and you still have the nerve to let me take action. As for 30 years later, won't the new round of elites in the 11th Division who were eligible to integrate into the forest seed grow again? Senju Makoto would not mind giving a very low price for friendly medical assistance at the time, so that Kinpachi Zaraki can fight in the 11th Division as much as he wants. Coincidentally, this will open a new round of medical loans for the 11th Division. Finally, when Makoto Senju saw off Yamachika Isuko who was returning with the contract, he also gave Yamachika Isuko a benefit of annual full-body checkup of the 11th Division with guilt, which made Yamachika Isuko more moved by Makoto Senju's help. Makoto, fortunately, you're in the 4th Division, although Yamachika Isuko, who was completely fooled, did not say this, he could not help but sigh in his heart. As Yamachika Isuko left, Kotetsu, who was standing behind Makoto Senju, could not help but say reluctantly, "Vice Captain Senju, is it a loss to give away the annual full-body checkup of the 11th Division for free?" "Loss? How could it be a loss? How can you know that you are sick without a checkup? Especially those muscular brothers who may sometimes just endure it and get through it, how can they not receive treatment from the 4th Division as soon as possible? Instead of letting those muscular brothers waste their money on unnecessary entertainment, it is better to invest in your own spirit." Of course, although Senju Makoto was complaining so darkly in his heart, in order to avoid pollution, he still embraced the beauty and purity of everything. He turned around and spoke. "Yain, as a medical team, the 4th Division cannot focus on losses or profits in everything. What is more important is to maintain the health of all the Shinigami." After a pause, Senju Makoto said with some sighs, "It is because the 4th Division is still short of manpower now, otherwise I would have planned to carry out free inspections throughout the entire Seireitei to further ensure the health of the Shinigami in the entire Seireitei." In an instant, although Kotetsu had long believed that Senju Makoto was undoubtedly the most gentle and kind person in the entire GOT 13, he couldn't help but be touched by the great love of Vice Captain Senju. Perhaps, this is the innate great love of Vice Captain Senju. It is precisely because he is more capable that Vice Captain Senju always unconsciously takes care of as many people as possible. Vice Captain Senju, sooner or later your wish will come true, Kotetsuyan said with emotion. Of course, I also hope that day will come sooner, Senju Cheng said as he looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle in front of Kotetsuyan, looking even taller. Yuin, the graduation ceremony of the new Mao Academy will begin soon. You will represent the 4th Division to recruit new members. Ah. Kotetsuyan pointed at himself in shock, not believing that Senju Cheng would entrust such a heavy responsibility to him. The 4th Division has never been the first choice for graduates. In order to better treat patients and serve the Seireitei, I'm going to find a way to increase the salary and benefits of the entire 4th Division to more than twice that of other divisions. Thinking of this, Senju Cheng smiled slightly and said, in this way, it will surely increase the attractiveness to graduates, so Yuin doesn't need to worry. Kotetsuyan said with some concern. But in this way, the team's funds, Senju Cheng heard this and replied with an optimistic and gentle smile on his face. Don't worry, even if I have to live a harder life and Unohana-sensei's life is reduced, we must not let the team members down. It should be no problem to squeeze the team funds. At this moment, Kotetsuyan stopped talking, and only secretly vowed in his heart that he must help Vice Captain Senju as much as possible, and contribute his own strength to Vice Captain Senju's great love. As Kotetsuyan once again devoted himself to work diligently, he finished the treatment of patients in the morning and dealt with the funds of the 11th Division. Senju Cheng immediately planned to go to Rukongei in the afternoon to take Matsumoto Rangiku and Hizajishue to the Seireitei. Before, Senju Cheng temporarily placed Matsumoto Rangiku and Hizajishue near the residence of Haim, because there was no suitable residence and identity for them in the Seireitei. However, as Senju Cheng already has a noble title and his own courtyard, it is completely in line with the rules to place 2 souls from Rukongei in the Seireitei. More importantly, during Unohana Retsu's efforts, the Female Death God Association was about to be established, and Senju Cheng was also preparing to place the headquarters of the Female Death God Association in his own aristocratic courtyard. Therefore, Senju Cheng planned to let Matsumoto Rangiku and Hizajishue live in his aristocratic courtyard, so that he could have 2 free laborers to help with cleaning and the like. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 247 Great Buddha School. At the same time, in Hukomundo, at the exit of a certain hollow forest leading to the ground at Hukomundo. Bang, 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 with a series of harsh and undisguised footsteps, a giant Cheng-ge covered with muscles and 4 legs and limbs slowly walked out. Herald, this is the name that this giant Cheng-ge gave itself. The moonlight that faintly shone in from the exit in front made Herald's cold and bloodthirsty eyes reveal a trace of fluctuation. After devouring each other in the hollow forest for decades, the self-consciousness that was slowly awakened made Herald eager to leave the hollow forest full of devouring and chaos. When Herald's masked face was reflected by the moonlight of Hukomundo, Herald couldn't help licking his lips and muttered. The taste of the other Cheng-ge's should be much stronger than Killian, right? After all, Killian's chaotic and corrupt smell was nothing to a dignified of Cheng-ge's. However, the next moment, the look in Herald's eyes froze. A great void that looked 90% similar to a human, with one hand pointing to the sky and the other to the ground, and whose surface was completely covered with a strange and conspicuous golden color, was sitting cross-legged in front of Herald. In addition, on both sides of the golden great void, there were more than 10 great voids emitting the spiritual pressure of the Cheng-ge's. Herald was confused. What was going on? The Cheng-ge's were obviously devouring each other, so why did the more than 10 Cheng-ge's in front of him seem to be following the strange golden Cheng-ge's? And feeling Herald's emotional fluctuations, Synopsis, who was transformed by the false limbs into a golden Buddha image similar to that in human society, was already very familiar with the next process. At that moment, Synopsis's hands slowly drew an arc, then he put his palms together in front of his chest and made a Buddhist seal, making a buzz sound. Amituba, the donor is really lucky. Today I have encountered the gate of paradise. I should join my Buddha school and enjoy peace and happiness forever, without the danger of degeneration and annihilation. Herald, who had 4 limbs, was stunned at first, then suddenly reacted, took a fighting stance, and said sternly. What a mess, do you want to fight? At that moment, although Herald's attitude was particularly fierce, he had already prepared to escape with his independent consciousness and wisdom. After all, facing more than 10 big virtual beings, Harold was not a fool no matter how confident he was. However, Synopsis, who was transformed into the image of a big Buddha, seemed to have no hostility at all. He still sat cross-legged in the moonlight from a distance, and his whole head faintly exuded a kind of golden light full of bewitching power. Donor, you may have misunderstood. What our Buddha sect believes in is the supreme compassionate eternal peace and harmony Chongshan thousand-handed Buddha, which is the Eleventh Giant Buddha. After a pause, Synopsis continued. We are all believers of the Eleventh Giant Buddha. The tenet we follow is to advocate peace and refuse to sink into meaningless and endless killing and evolution. Harold asked in confusion. What a mess you were talking about. Killing and evolution are the fate and instinct of us yokais. Synopsis spoke slowly with a compassionate and loving attitude, and the voice that sounded like the sound of Buddha kept echoing in Harold's ears. It is extreme, but it is precisely because of this that we need to get rid of those entangled fates and instincts before we can enjoy the realm of bliss. As soon as these words came out, Harold's eyes moved. Yokais are very strong. Even in the entire Hukomundo, he is considered a strong one, enough to match the most ordinary captain-level Shinigami among the Shinigami. The Ichikais, which evolved from countless Killians, are born with the instinct to fight and their own unique abilities. However, Ichikais are also weak. They need to constantly devour other Ichikais in hesitation, loneliness, and fear, so as to maintain their own consciousness and not degenerate back to the confused Killians. Therefore, even though Harold was full of vigilance and hostility towards Synopsis in front of him, his words still made Harold's heart waver. And Synopsis was not surprised at all about Harold's changes. Just as no Yanzipping could refuse to become a Dragon Knight, no Ichikais could resist the fear of degeneration. Then, Synopsis's mouth did not move, and the buzzing sound like Buddhist music echoed into Harold's ears. If you want to enjoy the blissful state, you need to believe in the Eleventh Giant Buddha and offer the most noble faith. In this way, you will not have to worry about degeneration and will be far away from loneliness. We will be able to build the blissful world that the Eleventh Giant Buddha expects. Come on. The golden Buddha image of Synopsis continued to emit golden light, becoming the most eye-catching and special existence on the dead white surface of Hukomundo under the vast moonlight. There is no need to fight each other anymore. We are all evolved from the Killian and have independent consciousness. Why must we be trapped in the bitter sea of mutual killing and fear and unable to extricate ourselves? Even if the donor really killed countless of his kind and evolved to a higher level, Vastop, so what? Will he continue to kill Vastop to evolve? In this case, what is the meaning of the donor's consciousness that was born from the devouring of countless Killians? The sea of suffering is boundless. Turn back now. Donor. These three questions almost broke down Harold's psychological defenses step by step, and made Harold completely enter a philosophical time of self-doubt. Especially Harold's seemingly independent and mature consciousness, in fact, is just a newbie who just walked out of the Great Void Forest. If it were in the worlds of humans, Harold would be like a child who had just become sensible and encountered Synopsis's desperate deception as soon as he went out. If you believe in the Eleventh Giant Buddha, can you really avoid killing and not degenerate back to Killian? Of course, donor, if you join my Buddha sect, you can enjoy eternal bliss. Synopsis answered Harold in a compassionate tone. Harold finally remained somewhat sober and asked, is there any evidence? The fact that I and other believers of the Eleventh Giant Buddha appear here is the evidence, Synopsis answered calmly and compassionately. Chapter 248. Just tell me whether it has been solved. It must be said that what Synopsis said was undoubtedly more convincing than any other rhetoric. Achakas, except for some very special twins, they're undoubtedly solitary creatures that will constantly hunt their own kind. Normally, except for the Vastop-level Great Hollows who personally recruited some Achakas and set rules not to allow them to fight and devour each other, it is almost impossible for more than 10 Achakas to live in peace. However, in Harold's perception, Synopsis was obviously at the same level as Achakas, and it was impossible for him to force more than 10 Achakas to obey by relying on his strength. Otherwise, Synopsis would not have wasted much effort hunting Harold, and there was no need to waste more words. Just as Harold lowered his head to think, he looked up and was shocked to find that the more than 10 Great Hollows following Synopsis had unknowingly separated and completely blocked the direction where Synopsis could escape. At this point, whether Harold was willing or not, there was almost only one choice left. I'm willing to join the Great Buddha School. Very good. Synopsis nodded, and then said compassionately, please come to me, my Great Buddha School has a tonsure ceremony. Hearing this, Harold slowly walked in front of Synopsis. Synopsis also stretched out his palm, which was almost half the size of Synopsis's body, and then slowly fell on Herald's head. After the tonsure, the donor will no longer have the worries of evolution or degeneration. Witnessing this scene, the Ukase who had originally surrounded Herald all showed a hint of a hidden smile on their faces. But Herald felt that he was gradually relieved, and was full of expectations for the future that Synopsis talked about. The degree of expectation was almost comparable to the promise that humans would soon have an inexhaustible balance of money. The next moment, before Herald could react, Synopsis's body suddenly emerged from the palm of the still golden Buddha, and then bit off a piece of Synopsis's mask like lightning. At this moment, Herald, who had originally closed his eyes slightly, suddenly widened his eyes and revealed an expression of disbelief. That feeling was enough to be comparable to the fear of a human male suddenly touching a baguette when dating a female netizen, and what was even more terrifying was that the baguette had left a mark in the human male's body. However, Synopsis did not give Herald any time to react. In the blink of an eye, his body completely retracted into the palm of the Buddha, leaving Herald in fear. It's over. As an Uchukas, once some of his subordinates are swallowed and digested by the great void of the same level or higher, he will lose the possibility of evolution forever. Asshole, is this what you said about not having to worry about evolution? Go to hell. However, at the moment when Herald went berserk, 4 Ukase appeared at the same time on Synopsis's back, pressing Synopsis's shoulders and thighs, completely confining Herald in front of Synopsis. Amatuba, my Buddha school has always convinced people with reason. Donor, just tell me whether you have solved the troubles of evolution. Synopsis, who maintained the form of Buddha, asked kindly and peacefully. I will kill you, asshole. At this moment, Herald was like a human who had just entered society and had the most important thing cheated away. Anger, humiliation, unwillingness, and resentment completely filled Herald's heart. Don't worry, this move is like shaving your head to completely get rid of your 3,000 strands of troubles, so that you will not have evil thoughts because of evolution after entering the paradise. Synopsis continued to explain in a kind and peaceful tone. However, to Herald, these words did not seem to have relieved his worries. They were just like tricking Herald into self-castration. After losing the possibility of evolution, it meant that Herald would never be able to become stronger, and would always remain in the state of a newly born lower-level Uchukas. Then, one day, he would become food for more powerful Uchukas and be completely debarked by the other Uchukas. Extreme anger, extreme fear, were almost madly intertwined in Herald's heart. Not long ago, Herald had dreamed of stepping out of the Great Hollow Forest, stepping on the corpses of countless Uchukas to evolve to Vastod, and unifying the Hukomundo. In the end, Herald seemed to have his psychological defenses collapsed, and he shouted hysterically at Synopsis. Eat me, bastard, ha 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 ha, take my hatred and feel the deeper fear of evolution. However, as Herald expected, the Uchukas that were holding him down did not rush over to eat him. Instead, Synopsis pulled the shoulder of the Buddha with his backhand, directly tore off the entire huge arm, and then placed it in front of Herald. Herald looked at Synopsis blankly. Synopsis said compassionately. Amatuba, I am the Buddha of Lausanne, and I am merciful. Hunger will make us, as the same kind, constantly fall into hatred of devouring each other, so I will bear this hatred. For a moment, this scene that was like cutting meat to feed a needle deeply shocked Herald. The other Uchukas of various forms all bowed to Synopsis and chanted in unison. Amatuba, I am the Buddha of Lausanne, who is merciful. Then, many Uchukas sat around the huge arm left by Synopsis, and ate the huge arm in an orderly manner. For a moment, Herald even felt humility from it, just like the residents of Rukongeda with spiritual power will feel hungry, for Uchukas, if they do not devour souls of sufficient quality for a long time, in addition to gradually degenerating, they will also feel extremely hungry. It is for this reason that countless Uchukas have to devour their own kind frantically, evolve themselves, and fall into the seemingly endless fear. Slowly, Herald unknowingly sat on the edge of the huge arm, stretched out his hand to scratch a piece of meat, and then stuffed it into his mouth. This is the meat of Uchukas, yes, the hunger is satisfied. In an instant, tears flowed from Herald's eyes, and the resentment towards Synopsis in his heart completely dissipated. Instead, it was replaced by reverence and faith. Although Synopsis did pride himself of the future of evolving to a higher level, however, Synopsis also did not hesitate to use himself to satisfy the hunger of other Uchukas to prevent the possibility of the other Uchukas from degenerating. Chapter 249 I only trust the Thousand Hands Doctor. In the end, just as Synopsis had originally planned, the ending was already determined when Herald did not escape immediately. The only difference was that Harold was much easier to fool than Synopsis had expected, and convincing people with reason was enough. Evolution. After eating Harold's mask, Synopsis clearly felt that he was closer to his superior, the Akase. This efficiency of evolution was almost unimaginable to Synopsis in the past. Although this was the result of Synopsis devouring more than 30 Akase in just half a year. I am the Buddha of Lausanne. Compassion. With this thought, Synopsis silently chanted a Buddhist name in his heart, and then activated the ability of false limbs, forming an illusion similar to super speed regeneration to restore the missing arm. Perhaps, for other Achakas, super speed regeneration and high speed regeneration are useless abilities, so many Achakas will actively abandon this ability in exchange for stronger spiritual pressure and steel skin after evolution. Because once a part of Achakas is devoured, even if the injury is recovered, the possibility of evolution is also lost. But for Synopsis, the appearance that looks like a real golden Buddha is only created by the ability of false limbs. As for the spiritual pressure required to maintain such a huge Buddha form, Synopsis naturally maintains it by regularly devouring some parts of the limbs of the Achakas believers under his command, so as to realize the compassion of the respected Supreme Lausanne Giant Buddha. This is also what Synopsis felt after bidding farewell to Senju Cheng and returning to Huko, combined with the compassion and equality he felt from Senju Cheng, and the part of my Buddhist culture he came into contact with during the 1 month in the real world, Synopsis realized. Thus, Synopsis founded the Great Buddha School, and within half a year, he had gained more than 10 devout believers. As Synopsis once again put his hands on the ground and pointed to the sky, the other Achakas chanted one sentence. Amitabha, I am the Buddha of Lausanne, and I am merciful. Then, the other Achakas sat around Synopsis, waiting for the next Achaka who was destined to be with me at the exit of the Great Void Forest. At this moment, Senju Cheng was taking his Ajishue and Matsumoto Rangiku into the courtyard, and asked them to change into neater and cleaner clothes in the Seireitei. Senju Cheng felt that the spiritual power absorbed by Synopsis' forest seed had risen again, which made Senju Cheng a little more surprised. The sixth Synopsis, who only knew how to hide in the shell, actually made such terrible progress. At first, Senju Cheng just felt that it was a pity to kill Synopsis directly, so he released Synopsis and returned to Huko after integrating into the forest seed. However, Senju Cheng is now out of reach of the situation in Huko and has no time to intervene in the affairs of Huko for the time being, so there is no way to investigate it. While Senju Cheng was waiting boredly, the door prepared for Matsumoto Rangiku slowly opened a small crack. Senju Cheng subconsciously turned his head to look over, but found that Matsumoto Rangiku only showed her cute little head, and the white and delicate skin of Matsumoto Rangiku's shoulders could be vaguely seen. Senator, Dr. Senju, Matsumoto Rangiku shouted weakly with a flushed face. Any questions? Senju Cheng asked. Being questioned by Senju Cheng, Matsumoto Rangiku's face was so red that it almost bled, and her lips moved for a long time before she whispered with difficulty. Clothes are too complicated, I don't know how to wear them. Senju Cheng. But the next moment, Senju Cheng understood the difficulties of Matsumoto Rangiku. In the past, Matsumoto Rangiku had been living in the chaotic and poor Rukongai, with only the simplest clothes to cover her body, not to mention underwear, and even shoes in the most difficult period. Although Senju Cheng registered his Ajishue and Matsumoto Rangiku in the roster of Seireitei in the name of servants and maids of the Senju family, Senju Cheng intended to treat Matsumoto Rangiku and his Ajishue as brothers and sisters, so the clothes prepared for them were not the simple clothes of servants and maids, but the luxurious clothes comparable to those of noble sons and daughters. Therefore, it is completely understandable that Matsumoto Rangiku has some doubts about how to wear these luxurious clothes. Just like a few months ago, Senju Cheng was also at a loss as to how to put clothes on the materialized Senbon Sakura. Matsumoto Rangiku looked at Senju Cheng, who had not spoken for a long time, and her blushing face struggled to utter another word. Senator, Dr. Senju, can you come in and teach me? Teach? Senju Cheng subconsciously felt that this was undoubtedly inappropriate. Of course, it's not that Senju Cheng doesn't know how to wear those clothes. After almost falling over because of the small clothes on the body of the materialized Senbon Sakura last time, Senju Cheng, who had learned his lesson, had secretly studied and practiced hard to avoid similar accidents next time. Now, Senju Cheng can skillfully help others take off and put on all kinds of mainstream female clothes in the entire Soul Society in a very short time. The main reason for Senju Cheng's embarrassment is, Ichimura-jin is risking his life to be a spy. If something happens to his childhood sweetheart, the plot will undoubtedly be too bad. Although there is a huge age gap between him and Matsumoto Rangiku, and Senju Makoto only regards Matsumoto Rangiku as a free sister, he is also worried that it will cause unnecessary misunderstandings. Senju Makoto thought about it, and after declining, he proposed a relatively appropriate plan. How about you wait a moment, Rangiku? I'll go to the Kuchika family and ask a maid to come and help you. No, I only trust Dr. Senju, Rangiku Matsumoto said with a blushing face. And I know that when Dr. Senju treated me before, my spirit Dr. Senju already knew everything. After Rangiku Matsumoto said this, Makoto Senju didn't know how to refute for a moment, and felt that he was a little too worried and dirty. Okay then, Makoto Senju thought about it, flashed into the room towards the gap in Rangiku Matsumoto's door, and then closed the door with his backhand. In addition, in order to avoid being discovered by Hisaji who came out first and found that he was in Rangiku Matsumoto's room and caused misunderstanding, Makoto Senju also set up a temporary ghost barrier to block spiritual pressure and sound. At the same time, on the road not far from the Senju courtyard, Kusaka Yaoru and Unohana Retsu are heading towards the Senju courtyard with some female Shinigami. Chapter 250. What about Cheng? In addition to her well-known Kido and medical skills in Soul Society, Unohana Retsu's management ability is naturally beyond doubt. As the chairman of the Female Death God Association, although Kusaka Yaoru is the nominal chairman, it is undoubtedly Unohana Retsu who really manages all the details and promotes the various charters of the establishment of the Female Death God Association. Therefore, when the Female Death God Association was about to be established, Unohana Retsu deliberately led a group of female death gods to the Senju courtyard to make arrangements and used the Senju courtyard as the headquarters of the Female Death God Association. Kusaka Yaoru, who always seemed extremely lively and active in front of others, was now being held by Unohana Retsu's hand, and she looked unusually well behaved and cute. If someone was not aware of it, they might even think that Kusaka Yaoru, the pink lily, would be a good girl led by her mother. Yaorai, when we get to the courtyard, you can play by yourself, but you must not destroy anything. That is Makoto's courtyard, which is only temporarily linked to the Female Death God Association. Do you understand? Unohana Retsu gently instructed. Kusaka Yaorai blinked his round eyes, indicating that he understood. Unohana Retsu smiled gently, and then took the lead in walking into the Senju courtyard. Compared with the quiet beauty and luxurious details of the Unohana courtyard, this noble courtyard directly awarded to Senju Makoto by the Seireitei seems to be a bit simple and dilapidated. This is enough to show how much Makoto Senju put into building the Unohana courtyard, and he completely regarded the Unohana courtyard as his real home. This also made the gentle smile on Unohana Retsu's face seem to have a bit more sincerity. Then, Unohana Retsu turned to the group of female death gods who followed him in, bowed slightly, and then spoke gently but majestically. Then we will arrange it as planned, but please be careful. This is the private courtyard of Vice Captain Senju after all, and the association is just temporarily using it as its headquarters. Listening to Unohana Retsu's sermon, the group of female Shinigami from different squads were not dissatisfied at all, but their expressions became more excited. They looked around from time to time, as if they were looking for precious traces from Makoto. At this time, Hisaji, who had barely changed his clothes, heard the chaotic voice and hurried out. He stretched out his hands to block the way of the group of female Shinigami and asked, "Who are you? What do you want to do?" The appearance of Hisaji also made the faces of the Shinigami present show a bit of surprise. Who is this? He seems to be wearing clothes with the mark of the Senju family. Is he a relative of Dr. Senju? At this age, he can't be Dr. Senju's son. As someone said something, the scene suddenly became cold. It wasn't that the female Shinigami had lost interest in the discussion, but that they instinctively stopped under some inexplicable aura. The next moment, Unohana Retsu walked out from the crowd, his hands hidden in his sleeves, and said with a gentle smile on his face, "Excuse me, what's your name?" Hisaji looked at Unohana Retsu in front of him, his expression seemed to be stagnant for a moment, and then as if he had thought of something, he bowed and said, "Hisaji greets Unohana-sama." Hisaji? This surname, Unohana Retsu asked somewhat unexpectedly. "Do you know me?" Senju-sama has used the sketching technique to depict Unohana-sama's image many times, and Shuei had the honor of hearing Senju-sama introduce Unohana-sama. Hisaji answered respectfully. "Sketching technique?" Hearing this term, Unohana subconsciously remembered the picture album that he had put away, which contained all kinds of shameful postures depicted by Senju Makotao using the sketching technique. What image did Makotao depict in front of you? Unohana asked casually. Then, Hisajisue answered truthfully. In the past period of time, when Senju Makotao had free time, he would occasionally visit Matsumoto Rangiku and Hisajisue, taking them outings, barbecues, and telling them some interesting stories about the Seireitei. Occasionally, when he was interested, Senju Makotao would start painting, and the subject of the painting was naturally the beautiful Unohana teacher in his mind. Unohana confirmed that the image that Senju Makotao portrayed in front of people was gentle and dignified, and he mentioned his existence in front of outsiders many times. Although Unohana did not change at all on the surface, there was a hint of joy between his eyebrows and asked, "So, was it Makotao who brought you into the Seireitei?" "Yes, Unohana-sama, it was Senju Makotao-sama who just brought me and Matsumoto Rangiku here," Hisajisue answered. Unohana heard this and looked around and asked, "What about Makotao?" At the same time, in the house less than 5 meters away from Unohana, Senju Makotao pressed against the door, but he didn't even dare to breathe. Even though Senju Makotao knew that he had set up a ghost barrier to block sound and spiritual pressure, he still subconsciously held his breath. Not far from Senju Makotao, Matsumoto Rangiku, who had just listened to Senju Makotao's instructions and was about to change into the clothes of noble women in order, was affected by Senju Makotao and subconsciously stopped moving. Outside the house, facing Unohana question, Hisajisue also looked around in confusion and said, "No, I don't know. Senju-sama clearly told us to change clothes and come out to find him before. You guys?" Unohana realized something and turned to the direction where Senju Makotao was and asked, "So Rangiku Matsumoto is changing clothes inside?" "Yes." The honest Hisajisue nodded. Unohana narrowed his eyes slightly, sensing the spiritual pressure of Senju Makotao that could not be sensed in the entire Senju courtyard. And in this house in front of him, there was no spiritual pressure fluctuation at all. Immediately, Unohana turned and said to the group of female Shinigami behind him, "You all should make arrangements according to the plan first." "Yes, Chairman or Captain Unohana." Amidst a slightly noisy response, many female Shinigami slowly dispersed, and Kusaka Yaru seemed to be liberated and disappeared in an instant. Soon, only Unohana and Hisajisue were left standing outside the house. Then, under Senju Makotao's observation through the slight gap in the door, he watched with cold sweat as Unohana, with a gentle smile on his face, walked towards him. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.